Deep in a monster-infested forest, Toru Iban fought alongside his S-rank party, led by the hero Sane. He had spent years proving himself among heroes far stronger than he was. Lisa thanked him for saving her, while Sane pressed forward, urging the group not to slow down. The battle was almost won, and their teamwork felt unbreakable, yet something had shifted. The bond they once shared as childhood friends now carried a heavier weight, and Toru could sense a conversation coming that he wasn't ready for. Back at the tavern, the mood turned cold. Sora told him plainly that he should already know what this was about, and the silence around the table confirmed his fears. Sane admitted he'd hate to watch his best friend suffer, asking Toru to understand. Confused and blindsided, Toru wondered if he'd become nothing more than a burden to the party. Turning to Lisa for answers only deepened his shock. She coldly noted the growing gap in strength between him and the rest. Then he noticed the ring on her finger wasn't the one he'd given her. Nei looked away, unable to meet his eyes, while the rest of the group kept their distance, letting the tension speak for itself. Sora called out to her quietly, and Nei murmured back. Both caught between loyalty and guilt, neither wanted to voice aloud. Realization crept in. Toru asked if he was simply getting in the way of everyone's fun, his voice trembling as the truth started forming in his mind. Memories surfaced without warning, revealing Sane and Lisa together, intimate for who knew how long. His best friend had betrayed him and slept with his fiancée. Rage broke through his shock, and he lunged, snapping at Sane in fury as chaos erupted across the room. Fists collided as Toru demanded to know how Sane could do this, knowing full well he and Lisa had been engaged to marry. Nei tried to intervene, shouting for him to stop, but the violence had already spiraled beyond words. Sora called him scum without hesitation, and Lisa shouted back, demanding to know what was wrong with him, twisting the blame onto Toru instead. A ring clattered to the floor. Toru stared at it, stunned, before storming off in anger and heartbreak. Lisa's voice cut through the pain, declaring she wanted nothing more to do with him and telling him to stay away from them all. Rain fell over the quiet town as her farewell echoed behind him, final and unfeeling. Toru walked away from everything he'd known, the ring still resting in his palm as the storm mirrored his grief. Somewhere else, a mysterious woman smiled to herself, holding something delicate between her fingers, unaware of the storm about to change Toru's fate. Alone in the rain, Toru screamed out his anguish, collapsing beneath the weight of betrayal before rising again, fist clenched, ready to face whatever came next. The memory of Lisa and Sane kissing burned into his mind. She had cursed him for even asking what she'd been thinking when she slept with him, her guilt boiling into anger instead of remorse. Toru clenched his fists, cursing under his breath as the weight of everything crashed down on him at once. He lay sprawled in the grass afterward, staring at the sky, murmuring that he was only thinking about what came next for him. Pulling up his status, he studied the list of skills he'd built over the years, admitting most of them were practically worthless despite how many he had. Damage reduction, physical enhancement, skill enhancement, none of it amounted to much. One skill in particular, experience savings, remained a total mystery even to experts he'd once asked about it. His party members flashed through his mind, each at a level far above his own, and he wondered bitterly if things might have gone differently had he possessed a skill as powerful as Sane's. A black demon dog lunged out from the ruins nearby, snapping him back into the moment. Frustration bled into his swing as he muttered an apology to the beast, using the fight to release the anger still coursing through him. The kill registered instantly, and his skill list flickered before his eyes, though nothing about it seemed to make sense yet. Notifications began pouring in, his experience savings had reached their limit, paid out 100-fold, and his level had rocketed straight to 300. His body could no longer sustain its current form, and a message declared it would be rebuilt entirely, leaving him staring in disbelief as the transformation began. The surge rippled through the field around him, silence following the chaos as bones scattered and his very race shifted into something new, a dragon man. Panic set in as he checked his status again, level 300 staring back at him. He could hardly believe the notifications were real, urging himself to think clearly and sort out what had just happened. Light and energy tore through the clearing as the truth unfolded. His stored experience had finally broken free, unleashing everything he'd unknowingly hoarded. Saving experience, it turned out, had been building silently the entire time, an automatic skill designed to erupt only once it reached a set threshold. Everything clicked into place. He'd trained harder than anyone in the party yet never leveled up, and now, standing in the rain, he could only laugh at the cruel irony of it all. Wiping his face, he made a quiet decision. From this point on, he would travel the world instead of staying tied to what he'd lost. Despite the hollow ache still sitting in his chest, he reached toward the sky, telling himself that at level 300, there was nothing left to fear. He set his sights on the neighboring country, ready to start his journey by exploring unfamiliar ground. Arriving at the border town of Armand, he took in the lively streets, surprised at how full of life the place felt for somewhere so far from anywhere else. And then his eyes landed on a slave store, memories of his old party flickering behind them as he considered finding a partner he could actually trust. Inside a shop lined with cages, the shopkeeper greeted him warmly, tipping his hat and asking what he could offer his newest customer. Toru explained he needed a slave suited for battle, and the man asked if he had any racial preference in mind. A lizard man was suggested for combat, priced at 30 million, but Toru asked to see the other options first. An elf caught his eye next, offered at 25 million, described as untrained but potentially useful as a ranged mage in time. Curious about his limits, the shopkeeper asked what budget he was working with, and Toru answered plainly, 1.5 million. He was led toward the cheaper section, where the merchant admitted most of these slaves were weak, sickly and untrained, worth barely anything. Still, he added, some might be useful for other purposes, gesturing toward a frail girl curled in the corner of her cage. Toru asked if she'd somehow sensed his level, catching the shopkeeper off guard, then learned her price, a mere 110,000, astonishingly low even by these standards. She flinched and cried out as he approached, clearly weakened, murmuring in disbelief at the number 300. He asked for her name, and she answered softly, Kayed, while the merchant noted the price reflected just how sick she truly was. Without hesitation, Toru decided to buy her, repeating her name and telling her it suited her well. He led her out of the shop, and moments later the contract sealed itself around her, marking her officially bound to him. Carrying her gently through the streets, he reassured her that everything would be fine, and she answered with a quiet yes. At a clinic, a doctor examined her, explaining that her condition stemmed from a rare illness affecting beast people, complicated by the fact she had neither ears nor a tail. Toru pressed for answers, asking if this meant her physical abilities were naturally strong, while the doctor pointed out subtle traits, her elongated pupils, and a small tail-like bump. The doctor admitted a cure existed in theory, a potion made from a dragon's heart, though he doubted it would work on her, since she seemed to belong to an entirely original species rather than a known subspecies. Toru knelt beside her, promising she'd recover soon, and she flinched shyly at his touch, unused to any kindness. He told her plainly that in order to be useful to him, she needed to heal first, his tone firm, though his eyes carried something softer. When she asked if it was strange for a master to care for his slave this way, he brushed off the question, letting silence answer instead. With medicine in hand, he thanked the doctor, who jokingly corrected him for calling him old at only 30, before urging him to return once the pills ran out. Toru carried Kaidi onward, venturing into a dense forest alive with unfamiliar birds and rustling leaves. 3 hours into the trek, goblins lurked among the trees, watching him from the shadows as he pressed further into unfamiliar territory. He wondered aloud whether they relied on instinct alone to sense danger. Right before a hulking figure came crashing through the brush behind him, a massive shape unfurled itself from the canopy above, a dragon, towering where an entire army might normally be needed just to bring one down. He questioned whether he could actually take it alone. Rain poured as the beast reared up, easily 10 meters tall, dwarfing him completely as fear flickered across his face. Thinking of Kade waiting for him back home, he steadied himself, shouting for the dragon to face him head-on. The creature lunged with terrifying speed, its tail sweeping through the air as he barely held his ground. Bracing against the impact, he dug his heels into the earth, refusing to be pushed back by the sheer force of the attack. Fangs snapped inches from him, but the memory of his old party's abandonment surfaced. He swore he wasn't like them, unwilling to leave anyone behind now. He drove his blade upward, cutting deep as the dragon's jaws came crashing down toward him. Wings and claws thrashed wildly as the creature reeled from the blow, sent spiraling through the storm. It crashed through the trees below, the impact shaking the ground as dust and debris scattered outward. Staring at his hands afterward, Toru murmured in disbelief at what level 300 truly meant. Back home, he offered Keita a small handful of pills, promising they would help her feel better. She drank the medicine down, and he explained he'd gathered the ingredients himself, asking the local pharmacist to prepare it, then checked gently whether she could keep it down. Watching her sleep peacefully afterward, he noted the improvement was small but real, glad the treatment seemed to be working. Reflecting quietly, he admitted he never expected to reach a point where his own strength was something to be careful with, resolving to fight more cautiously from here on. The next morning, he found her curled up asleep in his room and asked, half amused, why she'd chosen to sleep there instead of her own bed. He carried a strange cut of meat to a local cook, insisting he had the money to pay for whatever dish they could make from it. The chef eyed it suspiciously, unsure what it actually was, until Toru revealed it came from the dragon he'd defeated, and moments later a sizzling steak arrived at the table. Tasting it, he declared it delicious, laughing that he'd never look at dragons quite the same way again after that first bite. Bringing breakfast to her bedside, he explained the meal was dragon burger, and Kaede stared at the plate, uncertain what exactly she was looking at. Watching her chew thoughtfully, he decided out loud that something needed to be done about her worn clothes. At the shops, she darted between racks and shelves excitedly, eventually choosing a pair of iron fans as her weapon despite them looking a little large for her frame. He noted quietly that her ease with the weapon made sense, given she'd originally come from the beast race. Passing a market stall, her eyes lingered on a display of pastries, and he caught her staring before she quickly looked away. He offered to buy her some, and though she insisted she was fine, her flustered reaction betrayed how much she actually wanted them. Sitting together afterward, she thanked him sincerely as she ate, savoring the treat while he watched in silence. When he asked her to stop calling him master, she simply replied that to her, he would always be exactly that. Tears welled up as she asked if he found slaves annoying, wondering aloud if he was planning to get rid of her. He rested a hand on her head, gently asking what had brought on such a strange thought in the first place. She admitted she wanted him to stay by her side for the rest of her life, and he answered simply that he had no intention of ever abandoning her. She promised to walk that path alongside him, and he admitted with a tired smile that while he wasn't the perfect master, he genuinely needed her there. Overwhelmed, she begged to stay with him forever, vowing she'd do anything he asked in return. Later, she joked about wanting scissors to trim her own bangs, and he awkwardly apologized before admitting he felt embarrassed hearing her say that. Startled by a sudden flash of light around him, he stared down at his own hands in confusion, unsure what was happening. Toru sat frozen on a bench, a strange notification washing over him as the girl beside him watched in confusion. A cascade of system messages flooded his vision, declaring his saved experience and magic had reached their limits and would be repaid in full. Staring at his own hands, Toru asked aloud how much power he had actually gained this time. He sat curled on the bench, visibly shaken, while Kaede admired him from a distance, convinced her master was an extraordinary man. She said it plainly to his face, and he answered with quiet disbelief, unsure if he deserved the praise. His status window confirmed it. Level 300, skills maxed at 50, numbers that shouldn't have been possible for a normal warrior. He pressed further, noting 2 saving skills still remained locked, and marveled that his skill level had shot far past anything ordinary. Turning to Kaede, he asked if there was anything she wanted, catching her by surprise. She hesitated, insisting there was nothing, though her expression suggested otherwise. Finally she admitted it. She wanted soap, the simple request landing softly amid the quiet tension. They arrived at a bathhouse, and Kaede asked nervously if they were really going in together. Toru shrugged it off, brushing past the awkwardness as he began undressing. The young man prepared a bath and asked Kaede to sit so he could wash her hair, but the shy fox girl hesitated, unwilling to let her master serve her. Ignoring her protests, he firmly ordered Kaede onto the stool until she reluctantly obeyed. After gathering his courage, he carefully began washing her hair while she quietly accepted his care. During the bath he asked about her race and learned Kaede belonged to the rare fox tribe. Remembering stories about golden-furred foxes, he accidentally startled Kaede, pulling her close before both froze in surprise. Embarrassed by the accidental misunderstanding, the young man apologized while Kaede quietly sat in silence, unsure how to respond after the awkward moment. Instead of getting upset, Kaede gently accepted his apology and admitted she did not mind, promising to follow whatever her master wished. Feeling relieved, he turned to leave, but curiosity made him lightly touch one of Kaede's fox ears, leaving her startled as the unexpected contact drew an adorable reaction. Toru gently declines Kaede's earlier request, telling her he'll consider it once she's older. She lowers her gaze and calls him master, visibly nervous about what comes next. Kaede admits her hair grows wild and needs trimming. Toru watches a lock fall away, quietly struck by how beautiful she looks. She reveals the cut strands hide her true ears, which surprises him. A hooded elder examines her styled hair and shares a theory that the god who shaped the beast race adored those ears, which is why some choose to keep the human-looking pair visible instead. Kaede tenses up at the comment, unsure how to react. Toru bluntly calls the whole idea a fetish, clearly unimpressed by the old man's explanation. Back home, Toru sweeps the floor while Kaede kneels nearby tidying up the room, their quiet routine settling into an ordinary afternoon chore. Kaede smiles warmly, telling him she had a good time that day, her expression soft and content. Toru returns the smile, saying they'll have even more fun tomorrow. She responds simply, saying she really hopes so. Under a glowing full moon over the sleeping town, she promises she'll stay by his side forever. He answers with a single quiet word of approval. The next day begins with Toru letting out a tired sigh as he steps through the doorway, clearly troubled by something. He explains that the shopkeeper overcharged him for sword repairs, visibly annoyed. Kaede, folding laundry, asks what happened. He readies his blade over his shoulder, cryptically saying, "Here we are." Katie tilts her head, confused by his mood. He recalls the previous day, when he was simply cleaning his sword and it suddenly snapped in his hands, leaving him stunned. At a weapons shop, he explains he went looking for a replacement. The shopkeeper hands over what he claims is the sturdiest blade in his entire store. Testing it outside, Toru swings the new sword through the air, satisfied with how it feels in his grip as townspeople pass by. He strikes again with full force, but the blade shatters instantly, sending fragments flying across the shop in a startling crash. Kaede stays silent, arms crossed in thought, while Toru sits slumped, admitting that's simply how things ended up. Suddenly energized, Kaede perks up and declares she knows the perfect weapon for him, catching him off guard. She leads him to the edge of a cliff overlooking ancient ruins, an old temple structure rising in the distance. He stares at it, recognizing where they've arrived. Wind sweeps across the field as she announces their destination, the Temple of the Sacred Arms. Toru reacts with disbelief at the scale of what she's suggesting. Inside rests a legendary set of sacred weapons, artifacts said to be usable only by those chosen for the role, reserved strictly for true heroes. Kaede stays confident that her master can succeed as they climb the towering stairway, though Toru admits under his breath that he doubts he'll manage to pull the weapon free. The pair pass beneath rows of ancient pillars, and Toru mutters that the whole place feels overwhelming in scale. Kaede explains that claiming the sacred arms requires passing 2 trials, first opening a sealed door, then removing the weapon from its pedestal. When Toru asks how she knows so much, she deflects, saying she simply knows someone knowledgeable about such things. They finally stand before a massive iron-bound door, and Toru announces that the first test has begun. Facing the door with no visible handle, Kaede suggests he simply try touching it. The moment his palm makes contact, the surface reacts with a surge of energy. Cracks spread across the stone floor beneath his feet as the door groans and swings open. Kaede cheers, praising him for succeeding at the first trial. Beyond the entrance lies a grand inner chamber, lit by rows of torches leading toward an ornate altar at the far end. Standing before the pedestal, Toru finds a slender blade already fixed in place. He notes it's a one-handed weapon, and hopes he can adjust to it, since legend says the sacred arms reshape themselves to match whoever wields them. Gripping the hilt, he braces himself and pulls, determined to see the trial through. The chamber erupts with light and force as the weapon resists, pressure radiating outward and staggering him with the strain of the attempt. With a final effort, he wrenches the blade free, the impact of its release rippling across the room and drawing a startled reaction from Kaede. Once the surge settles, Toru credits her for guiding him to the temple in the first place, admitting he'd have been left weaponless otherwise. She congratulates him warmly on completing the trial. He tries to downplay his success, saying she's giving him too much credit, but she insists he was always destined to be the one chosen, certain he would have found his way there regardless. Walking together, Toru quietly reflects on his old party, recalling that Lisa never once praised him during his time traveling with them, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. Shaking off the thought, he turns back to Kaede with a smile as she happily declares that now they can finally set out on adventures together. Standing before the ruins with the road ahead, he lays out their next move, forming an official group once they reach the city and making their debut as adventurers, while Kaede shares in his excitement for what's coming. Within a faintly illuminated hall, 2 people entwined on the bed, their intimacy concealed from public view but not from betrayal. The lady, amazed, unveiled her failing point, lost in both desire and shame. He taunted her weariness, whereas remembering the features of the one they had wronged, admitted that she had forever been his, ridiculing the affection and devotion of their discarded comrade. Yet unnoticed to them, others who enjoyed fondness for the identical man lay silently. Sane rested alongside the lady formerly devoted to Toru, masking betrayal behind a smile and whine. He unveiled the fact the women were not genuinely in affection, merely controlled by a rare skill he possessed. Wielding the demonic eye of lure, he controlled their feelings, changing affection into obedience. Envious of Toru's history, Sane made fortune to favor him, twisting emotions through power. Currently reveling lacking regret, he mocked Toru's agony beneath a shallow mask of victory. Tales predicted the Fiend Master's return, a disaster returning every century, born from darkness or, at times, from mankind. Guided by avarice and desire, Sane pursued fame, indulging without pause as he pursued sacred relics. Elated, he assumed his existence had arrived at its peak, laughter echoing in arrogance. His success broke when he learned the worm had already fallen, confusion overtaking pride. Nobody could identify the champion accountable, merely that the beast lay slain long before he arrived. Although Sane insisted he wasn't furious, his tightened hand against the tree betrayed his frustration. Lisa wondered about the worm's downfall, whereas Nei's casual attitude only worsened his mood. Wearing a grin, he commanded a shift in plans, pretending the disruption meant little. Surprise gripped him when he discovered the holy arms were missing without a trace. Fury erupted, he struck out, menacing even his own companions in a storm of panic. Uncertainty hit Sane as he felt a formidable presence, one too familiar. Fury flared alongside the understanding that Toru might be back, the dragon's downfall and the missing sword. Resolved to recover his renown, Sane rushed towards the dungeon of Luntada, shouting his ambitions. Nevertheless, a resident's composed reply unveiled the dungeon had already vanished a month ago. When questioned for guidance, the answer provided nobody, leaving Sane bewildered by the absurdity of it all. Sane's knees shook as understanding settled in something beyond his control was unfolding. Overhead the capital, people floated in disorder as a massive crater replaced the streets, confusion spreading fast. 1 week prior, the lofty building of Luntada remained firm, unaware of the coming disaster. A maiden rejoiced obtaining her initial adventurer's card, eager to begin her journey. Close by, a veteran combatant gently restored his previous rank, stepping back into a world he once abandoned there. In the spirit of the busy capital, the company stepped into a district known for its drinking and entertainment. Clearly embarrassed, asked her master's curiosity in such sights, offering herself as a companion instead. Afterward, discussion moved to labyrinths, age-old places filled with secrets, existing long before the city itself. The youth clarified how explorers endure by harvesting resources from fallen monsters. Outside survival, he unveiled the largest reward, the fabled core stone hidden deep within the dungeon. As the company neared the lofty gateway, Toru warned them they would merely explore the first floor for safety. Alongside enthusiasm and assurance, he and the maiden prepared to begin their descent. Within, they crossed ruined corridors until she cast a spell that effortlessly cut through enemies. Toru watched her technique in stillness, astonished by how capable she really was. Her offhand admission of reaching Tier 15 departed him stunned and speechless. Toru was puzzled by how swiftly she advanced up, regardless of having merely begun an hour ago. She credited it to his companionship, and he started to believe his training benefits were affecting her growth. On the next level, she sprang into combat against a group of surprised monsters. Alongside composed accuracy, she used Blizzard Blossom, unleashing a powerful ice spell. Icy spikes burst, trapping the enemies as she watched, confident and unshaken. Alongside a smooth turn, she finished the combat, amid by shattered ice and scattered debris. Although she had defeated the whole level, she modestly maintained that level 30 wasn't enough to guard Toru. Toru proposed going back, having collected sufficient provisions, but her determination to grow stronger pushed her on. Just prior to making, she discovered a peculiar item that seemed insignificant at first glance. Upon appraisal, it unveiled proper as a scarce sorcery storage, with 100-item capacity. Keen to proceed, the maiden grinned brightly, but Toru firmly declined. He clarified they were running short on provisions and required to return prior to risking starvation. Telling her there was no need to hurry, Toru warned her that advancement could be created steadily. Alongside their new container relics secured, the two prepared to exit the dungeon. As evening collapsed, they came back to the busy roads above, their journey far from over. Amazed by the taste, the maiden gladly praised the meal, savoring every bite. Toru, sitting close by, commented on her hunger, satisfied by the day's success in the dungeon. He warned her that she had deserved the meal personally, with her own efforts. Shifted, she shoved her dish toward him without any delay. Smiling cheerfully, she maintained they eat alongside since meal, she assumed, tasted better when shared with someone special. Toru grinned kindly, taking her offer to eat alongside as the night settled outside the inn. Remembering on his bitter history, he understood how much Kade's companionship had quietly changed his world. Alongside the moonlight above, he sensed a scarce calm, hopeful that their journey could fill the emptiness inside. But calm was brief-lived. Dawn came with a sudden cry. Shocked up, Toru rested up, bewildered by Kaeda's urgent expression. Toru's gaze opened in sheer surprise as he awoke to something unforeseen before him. Kaeda remained changed, her body grown suddenly. Confused and anxious, she clutched the blanket, awaiting his reaction. He remained icy as a changed Kaede emerged prior to him. Her appearance drastically changed overnight. Kaede softly verified her identity, alongside a radiant smile, easing Toru's doubts. Remembering on the unexpected shift, Toru recalled how she had been a young maiden just the morning prior to. She clarified that her form shifted due to a rapid surge in her tier. Toru listened intently as she unveiled the transformation was common following surpassing Tier 20, balancing might alongside growth. Quietly acknowledged he could not anymore cite Kaede as a youngster following her sudden transformation. Embarrassed, he asked her lack of clothing, urging her to cover up. Kaidi hesitated, embarrassed. Reaching into a bag, Toru handed her a shirt. She saw the known scent and questioned if it was his. He assured her that it was acceptable if she decided not to wear it. Kaidi emerged wearing the large top, smiling as it freely hung over her new form. Toru, amazed, maintained Kaidi required pants too, struggling to adjust to her new body. Afterward, Kaidi emerged in a proper attire, beaming as she proudly displayed off her new look. She attempted handling her weapon, prompting Toru to assess her readiness for combat. Confidently, she affirmed her command, keen to prove personally skilled with dual magical attacks. As they strolled into municipality, amazed onlookers pivoted to watch the striking pair approach. They strolled across the capital. Passers-by stared in awe at her beauty, whispering admiration and envy. Kaidi, unfazed by the focus, announced her intent to earn funds, whereas Toru sighed at the unwanted stares. He warned her that he yet had funds departed from a worm hunt, and had by now readied supplies. Excited, Kaidi cheered for the morning forward, keen for fun and quest. Their travels guided them into an enigmatic hall flooded with rushing waterfalls and hidden danger. A horde of skeleton warriors rushed forward, rattling alongside violent intent. Kaidi met them alongside sharp, concentrated gaze. Lacking any delay, she unleashed a formidable gale incantation, scattering the undead midair. Summoning magical fans, she readied a barrage of attacks alongside accuracy and command. The battlefield was torn apart as bones and weapons flew in each direction. Alongside the level defeated, Kaidi grinned triumphantly, whereas Toru noted the battles were becoming too easy. Kaidi questioned if Toru was tired, and he acknowledged to waking up early, feeling a bit sluggish. Following clearing the region, Kaidi created a composed space, surprising Toru alongside her unexpected gesture. She knelt gently and softly invited him to sit down, her companionship warm and composed. Toru accepted to rest, watching her grin alongside subtle relief. As they rested alongside, a tranquil atmosphere darkened quiet, close, and comfortingly familiar. Gradually unsealed his gaze, yet groggy from a deep and undisturbed sleep. He thanked Kaidi for letting him rest peacefully, ignorant of the silent effort back it. Glancing about, he saw a pile of overcame opponents, and Kaidi casually unveiled she'd taken care of them. Astonished, admired her thoughtfulness as she softly brushed dust from his garments. Amazed by the tranquil warmth, he sensed as if he had arrived at divine bliss. Kaidi pivoted at Toru's query. Astonished, he wished to see her stats. Although he offered her the choice, she grinned softly and opened her status screen. As he read across the details, her high tier, race, and impressive sorcery class, Toru sensed a growing understanding. Her technique list included scarce and advanced abilities, alongside force boost and healing waves standing out amid them. Staring at her composed look, Toru quietly understood Kaidi wasn't just talented. Toru, reassured following seeing Kaidi's abilities, proposed they proceed deeper within the labyrinth. Alongside a radiant grin, Kaidi accepted, eager to advance further if Toru permitted. On the 10th level, they were instantly confronted by beasts and goblins. Kaidi swiftly sprang into combat. Calling forth a wide-range incantation, she unleashed aerial slash, clearing opponents in a single sweep. Afterward, Toru inquired about her magical command, and Kaidi clarified how leveling up had drastically increased her efficiency. As shadows of opponent riders loomed forward, Toru informed Kaidi to call for him if required. Calmly, Kaidi summoned her sorcery, formally more, and unleashed a devastating aerial gust toward charging creature riders. Toru observed the aftermath, noting how the supposedly powerful goblin cavalry were helpless prior to her. By nightfall, the pair arrived at the 20th level, sharing a silent food behind the stars. Although Kaidi shouted at duty, Toru treated her as an ally, easing the weight back her remarks. Toru was amazed to learn Kaidi had by now arrived at tier 150, gaining over 100 levels since they started. As they enjoyed a warm food, Kaidi complimented his cooking, lightening the instant alongside sincere joy. Curious, Toru questioned about wielding sorcery, wondering if there were any concealed techniques. Kaidi clarified that the mystery lay in visualization. Forming a clear image was the heart of casting spells. Inspired, Toru tested the theory, amazed as a tiny flame flickered to existence in his palm. Following attempting to conjure flame once more, Toru struggled to maintain command. Motivated, Toru vowed to refine his abilities, wanting to channel his unused sorcery effectively across hard work. Meanwhile, on the 19th level, a fierce combat burst as formidable enemies clashed. A burst of enthusiasm illuminated up the hall, signaling the start of a brutal exchange. Kaidi, caught in close combat, responded swiftly alongside force and accuracy, holding her earth amidst the disorder. Toru urgently cautioned Kaidi of formidable foes: forward orc warriors, cursed skeletons. Lacking flinching, Kaidi faced the threat directly, leaping into combat as the Minotaur's hand neared. In a rapid counter, she conjured freezing sorcery, casting an icy wave that halted the opponent's advance. The battlefield collapsed silent, her opponents currently encased in solid frost, unmoving. Although concerned, Toru understood she had surpassed expectations by now tier 200, and stronger than ever. Reaching the 30th level, Toru urged Kaede to stay alert regardless of the eerie stillness and absence of opponents. Their gaze locked onto the radiant labyrinth heart, proof they had arrived at the end of the trial. Kaede maintained Toru be the one to touch it, modestly crediting him for her advancement. Alongside a silent breath, Toru arrived at forward, wondering what prize awaited. Alongside, they remained prior to the heart, on the brink of the unknown. Toru's consciousness came back gradually, as he learned a known tone calling out to him. He rested up groggily, noticing the maiden watching him alongside concern within an unfamiliar cavern. Looking up, they understood the labyrinth had disappeared, making a gigantic hole overhead them. A ring was on Toru's finger. She had one too. They suspected it was a prize for completing the labyrinth swiftly. Their rewards emerged: rings of disguise and a labyrinth proper. Wielding appraisal, the maiden verified the ring's function, disguising profile. Each tier enhanced its ability. Toru examined the ring thoughtfully. Its usefulness was distinct given their circumstance. Alternatively of hesitating, he provided to carry her, preparing to escape the gigantic pit. Alongside resolve, Toru sprang high, ignoring her doubts as they soared across the air. They landed safely. Acknowledging their result, the two chose to leave swiftly prior to trouble came. Behind the moonlit heavens, the municipality remained silent, a gigantic crater marking the dungeon's vanishing. 2 days afterward, Toru and his ally traveled across a crystal-laden woods trail. Although the travels sensed aimless, they accepted on visiting the capital of Einarek with a specific goal. Following her lead, Toru crossed a false stream, curious about their next goal. Their route guided to an age-old building hidden beneath towering trees. Toru and his ally came at age-old remains assumed to be remnants of a caught civilization built by the great races. As they explored, Toru expressed fascination alongside remains, calling them a romantic part of quest. They stopped to taste local meal, appreciating the simple pleasures of travel. Whereas resting, she questioned if their team should have a identify. Toru proposed roaming brigade. She gladly agreed. He announced his intent to enjoy the realm at his own pace, keen for a tranquil travels. Their rest was interrupted by the sound of an approaching carriage. Toru grabbed the opportunity to ask about Kaede's history, but the instant was slashed brief. The carriage was under assault by mounted bandits, clearly in threat. Lacking any delay, Toru shouted for combat. His ally agreed instantly. She sprang into combat from overhead, launching their rescue. Bandits sealed in on the carriage, calling threats and enjoying their instant of force. Toru stopped one of the raiders mid-ride, dragging him off the horse easily. Standing solid, Toru demanded the company stop. Bewildered and cornered, the bandits hesitated at his unexpected body. Pressure rose as two of them rushed forward, blades raised and calling for his death. Alongside a single explosive move, Toru unleashed a formidable force, launching all attackers within the air. Toru assessed the damage from his overwhelming strike, admitting he may have gone too still as disorder amid him. Back him, his ally skillfully deflected a volley of arrows alongside composed precision. One opponent collapsed at her feet, prompting her to declare their inferiority lacking any delay, whereas others fled in terror. They casually commented on the feeble tier of the attackers, confirming the circumstance was under command. She introduced personally as Marianta, child of Count Rhoda, grateful for their timely rescue. Toru introduced himself boldly as an explorer, and pointed to Kaede, identifying her as his slave. Marianta grinned, and addressed him formally, repeating his identify alongside enthusiasm and curiosity. Alongside eagerness, she invited both of them to her estate to express her thanks. Within the carriage, she proposed they rest at her residence for the evening prior to continuing to Einark. Although Toru attempted to decline politely, Marianta reassured him alongside a kind grin, insisting it was no trouble. A silent attendant greeted Toru alongside a composed look as he stepped into the room. When questioned about her opinion, Kaede simply grinned and affirmed she would follow Toru wherever he moved. Shortly following, the carriage neared a huge capital. The company gazed out the window as Einark emerged in sight. Their arrival at a grand estate marked the beginning of a new chapter. Within, the staff welcomed Toru alongside formal hospitality. As they stepped into the estate, a respectful butler welcomed Marianta, whereas Toru admired the luxurious interior alongside awe. A soft-spoken attendant shattered the stillness, expressing regret for not introducing personally sooner. She introduced personally as Urara, Marianta's personal retainer, and provided to show them to their rooms. Toru was guided to an elegant guest hall, its comfort and size making him wordless. Letting his protect down, he collapsed onto the bed alongside a mix of relief and childish excitement. He was taken by surprise when Marianta stepped into his hall playfully, teasing his prior excitement. She invited him to investigate the capital alongside, and he agreed. By now planning to head outside, Kaida entered the touring alongside cheerful curiosity. Whereas walking, Toru spoke alongside Urara about Marianta's caution, telling her of his might and experience. Shortly following, they wandered across the roads, Kaide illuminated up at the mention of sweets, asking to try them as Marianta guided the way. Toru was amazed as Kaide handed him a heavy pouch, leading an outburst of bewilderment. She thanked him alongside a radiant grin he'd given her spending funds. As they admired sweets, Toru reflected inwardly. Agony from a history treachery yet lingered, yet he wished to heal someday. If calm ever covered his grief, he believed, he'd not anymore need to keep a person controlled to him. Marianta enjoyed its account alongside confidence, whereas Toru appreciated its craftsmanship, smiling at her honesty. The earth shook lacking warning, drawing focus from the crowd in the square. Abruptly the statue broke, releasing violent tendrils that burst from underneath. She was caught in the disorder, lifted helplessly within the air by the peculiar force. Toru observed in horror as she was dragged away, incapable to stop it. Monstrous tentacles burst from underground, grabbing multiple citizens in the square. The earth collapsed violently as she was dragged into a gigantic hole. Toru and others could merely watch in surprise. Toru scanned the aftermath. Residents wept out, realizing loved ones had been taken. The damage was widespread. A maiden sprinted towards the hole. Toru shouted, ready to follow and help retrieve the gone. Alongside urgency, Toru and his companions chased following her, readied to features whatever lay underneath. Toru proposed that their tiny company was sufficient to start the search, presenting a assured smile to reassure the others. Lacking any delay, the trio sprang within the hole, resolved to rescue those who had defeated below. As they descended, the fox-eared maiden readied an incantation to soften their landing alongside a magical cushion. Moments afterward, she used a glowing glow orb to brighten the shadowy underground hall ahead. Illuminated by the orb, they remained prior to lofty statues in a vast. Toru understood they had stepped into a maze of age-old remains beneath the city. As they explored, a peculiar trail of mucus stretched throughout the level, leading deeper within the shadow. Toru grabbed Limit, assigning Kaida to the center and Urara to the rear as they trailed the slimy route. Alongside weapons ready, the company pressed forward, readied to features whatever lay ahead. Within the lower levels, beasts emerged, cutting across threats whereas questioning how far the ruins descended. Following Mariantha's scent and the trail of footprints, Kaida guided the team forward across the unnoticed. Abruptly, a reptilian creature lunged at Toru, but it was hit down prior to it could reach him. They regrouped swiftly. Kaida verified the scent was getting mightier. Toru thanked Urara, who unveiled her true profession, an assassin. Their route finished at a gigantic sealed entrance, surrounded by flames and ancient carvings. Within, a company of armed opponents waited, ridiculing their unexpected arrival. On the bridge, hostile demons taunted the company alongside crude remarks, keen for violence and worse. Toru assessed their horns and verified they were demons. Kaida readied to distinct a way forward. She used an off-rust barrier, separating the opponent forces and opening a passage between them. The company shifted across the gap, but some were split off in the disorder. Kaide and Urara urged Toru to push forward and rescue Mariantha lacking any delay. Toru rushed forward, trusting Kaide and Urara to hold the line back him as opponents offered chase. He swiftly dodged strikes, knocking foes aside and leaping over rubble as the route narrowed. At the hall's center, he halted, confronted by a grotesque beast amid by writhing tentacles and captives. A horned fiend emerged, smugly welcoming him as prey for the creature. Lacking backing down, Toru demanded to know who was genuinely back the disorder. Throughout the ruined hall, questions were exchanged, motives challenged, intentions demanded. Feigning civility, the fiend provided to speak, hiding cruelty back a smug grin and polished remarks. Mid-sentence, tendrils struck out and captured Toru. The being unveiled a concealed network behind the city's tools for invasion. Everything pointed to a larger strategy. Mariantha's capture was deliberate, a tactic to keep nobles in check. Clutching his hostage, the fiend mocked their powerlessness, assured that terror ensured submission. Laughing echoed across the hall as ridiculing threats expanded across the air, taunting the one who stood unfazed. Alongside a single motion, a formidable strike broke the creature's grasp, freeing the route ahead. No remarks were required, resolve displayed in each step, silencing arrogance with sheer presence. Blasts burst in caution, drawing a clear line between challenge and retreat. Even as threats intensified, the reply arrived alongside steady gaze and steady dare to fight back. Orbs swirled about the hall, trapping the target in a deadly ring of detonations. An explosive wave burst, engulfing the level in roaring flames and rubble. A twisted grin formed as the fiend assumed survival was impossible. Smoke defeated to admission a lone figure standing tall, untouched, composed amidst devastation. Alongside composure, he dismissed the threat, labeling the opponent not just a foe but a beast. The opponent cast different spell, but hesitation betrayed his fear. Amid the smoke, the combatant advanced unfazed, igniting surprise and shock. Alongside a clean strike, he shattered across the fiend's defense, catching him wide open. Standing solid, he dismissed any praise, claiming no rank, merely a combatant doing his part. Supported by her attendant, Marianne gradually regains consciousness, her look clouded alongside bewilderment and distress. Delight spreads swiftly amid the locals as word of her awakening reaches them. An audience gathers, expressing heartfelt relief. Appearing prior to her, Toru and Kaede bring a reassuring companionship. Marianne reacts alongside surprise upon seeing them. Toru recounts the incident and assault by a being from the underground remains. Marianne, yet weary, questions who guarded the capital. Alongside a gentle grin, the attendant reveals that Toru and Kaede were the ones who arrived to Marianne's rescue. Amazed by the fact, Marianne looks at them alongside wide gaze. As the locals gather about, they express heartfelt thanks to the duo who rescued their lives and overcame the beast. Toru receives the praise alongside humility, clearly embarrassed by the overwhelming thanks. Overcome alongside emotion, Marianne throws her arms about Toru, sincerely thanking him for protecting the citizens she cares about. He remains icy as Marianne clings a bit too tightly, her closeness catching both him and Kaede off protect. At the grand estate, Marianne rushes into her parents' arms, relieved to see him safe and sound. From a distance, Toru and Kaede watch the touching reunion in stillness prior to returning back. Afterward, Kaede explains the opponent they faced was one of the Fiend Master's top generals, albeit the weakest. As the temper softens, Marianne's parent approaches Toru and Kaede. Marianne's parent formally greets Toru, acknowledging his bravery for rescuing her not formally, but twice. Alongside a sincere grin, he offers his heartfelt thanks to the young explorer. Although Toru insists it was just luck, Marianne pleads for her parent to prize him properly for his work. Considering her appeal, the aristocrat hesitates, unsure of what would suit Toru best. As all observes, Urara steps forward, ready to admission something that might influence the decision. Toru confirms that the opponent he overcame was one of the Fiend Monarch's elite generals, surprising everyone present. Curious about his next move, Marianne's parent asks if Toru's strategy to visit the metropolis. Following a brief exchange, the nobleman agrees to send a note to assist Toru's travels. Grateful for the offer, Toru is invited to stay longer, alongside Marianne gladly volunteering as his guide. That evening, the company enjoys a lavish meal, enjoying calm and comfort following the chaos. Whereas enjoying dinner, Toru notices meal on Kaede's features and casually points it out, making her embarrassed. Moved by his care, Kaede appreciates him. As the evening continues, Urara asks if Toru will be free to investigate the underground remains the next morning. Marianne questions his curiosity, and Toru explains it's a scarce opportunity for discovery as an explorer. Excited by the mystery, Toru passionately describes the remains, making Kaede resigned but amused by his enthusiasm. Abruptly, Marianne declares she'll join the expedition, catching everyone off protect alongside her resolve. Kaede protests, concerned for Marianne's caution, whereas Urara volunteers to accompany them as well. Marianne pleads to come as an ally, hoping Kaede will accept her appeal. Unwillingly, Kaede gives in, unable to refuse following hearing Marianne's sincere remarks. Toru outlines the strategy, he'll handle the threat, whereas Kaede and Urara protect Marianne from harm. By the fountain, Kaede and Toru wait patiently until their ally rushes over alongside an apology. A knight in full mail appears, declaring readiness, making everyone amazed and bewildered. Explaining personally, she says her parent maintains she wear the mail for protection. Toru softly protests, concerned it would hinder movement during emergencies. Reluctantly, she agrees to shift. Reappearing in more useful clothing, she boldly asks for approval and earns immediate praise. Outside the gated gateway, a worn and vine-covered ruin stretches into shadowy gem corridors. A map reveals that whereas upper levels are known, deeper areas remain largely uncharted and deadly. Alerts come swiftly. Falling rooms, swarms of demons, and unexplored sections make the expedition risky. Intent on minimizing threat, Toru volunteers to scout the perilous zones solo, whereas others stay back. Marianne protests fiercely, insisting she's skilled of defending personally, surprising everyone alongside her resolve. Whereas navigating the age-old corridors, Marianne curiously asks for the party's identify. Toru introduces them as the Munyu Brigade just prior to Kaede detects close-by demons. An enormous mushroom-type beast is identified across appraisal, prompting the team to prepare for combat. They proceed carefully, observing the bizarre fungus-covered tunnel forward. A passing rat triggers a trap, mushrooms erupt, and Quaida notes the vines are laced alongside deadly poison. Rather than endanger the companions, Toru decides to descend solo. Although reluctant, Quaida gently asks him to be cautious, her gaze showing more than her remarks. Marianne abruptly clings to him, pleading for him not to act recklessly, her concern failing across her usual composure. Alongside final glances exchanged, he enters the fungus-flooded route solo, whereas the others watch from behind. Amid by moving mushroom beings, Toru pauses in stillness, fully aware that threat is by now closing in. Mushroom beasts charge from all sides, but Toru stands solid, blade drawn, unfazed by their numbers. Elsewhere, Kaida gently thanks Marianne for her concern, a scarce instant of emotional openness enjoyed between them. Back in combat, Toru launches into a formidable spinning kick, scattering opponents in all guidance. His companions watch in awe, as rubble and spores fly, amazed by his overwhelming enthusiasm and assurance. Confidence rises as he muses on his dragonfolk blood, possibly the strongest in the realm. Outside the twisted vines, Toru steps into a sealed hall flooded alongside old furniture and strewn remnants of the history. Cautiously searching, he uncovers age-old texts, dusty artifacts, and a box full of enigmatic vials. One vial remains out. Confidently, he picks it up, thinking it might yet retain its potency. Rejoining the companions, he's greeted alongside concern and interest about his findings. Grinning, he reveals a potential elixir and a key, impressing all alongside his discovery. Pressure rises as Kaide pulls Marianne away, caution her not to get too close to Toru. Urara intervenes alongside a sharp stare, scolding Toru for lacking composure, sending him into a terror. The company descends to the second level, entering a wider, uncharted section of the remains. As theories surface about the remains' origins, Toru ponders the true nature of age-old labyrinths. Surprising all, Marianne moves forward and requests to be trained, tired of forever needing protection. Marianne pleads for training, frustrated by her weakness. Toru pauses, but Kaide offers healing support if required. She shares her longing to grow mightier for her parent. Urara, shifted by her resolve, agrees to help. Training begins. The company finds balance and unity across faith and teamwork. Abruptly, Toru receives multiple role titles and ranks as concealed training surges within him. An unexpected bolt of radiant glow cracked across the heavens, startling the tranquil town below. Toru, amid them, felt a peculiar disturbance, unsure of what he had just witnessed. Although the heavens seemed composed, Toru couldn't shake off the feeling that something formidable had just awakened. A clash burst, lightning rushed as opponents emerged. Toru remained ready, caught between surprise and instinct. Amazed, Toru understood his skills had evolved. The glow wasn't random, it was his force awakening. As the smoke faded, Toru remained calmly, whereas others observed in stillness, unsure if the threat had passed. Astonished by the outcome, Toru acknowledged his powers had shifted and questioned for an instant to assess them. His updated profile unveiled multiple new titles, all formidable and scarce among adventurers. Curious, his ally questioned to inspect the details, and Toru allowed it, lacking any delay. She was amazed each of Toru's roles was elite, unmatched in status and value. Toru's ally clarified that combatant was the base from which his travels started, a simple but solid role. Currently, his progress had deserved him top-tier jobs: Worm Knight, Owner-Tamer, and Great Thief, each boasting scarce abilities. Amid them, Imitator stayed unclear. Its display was distorted, making her unable to evaluate it, whereas remembering a known possession listed in his profile. Prior to moving forward, he steadily instructed the company to follow orders and prioritize caution overhead all. Marianne and Urara questioned to temporarily join Toru's team, presenting their support as a gesture of faith. Their appeal was agreed, and they were officially welcomed within the Menu Brigade. Deeper in the remains, the company encountered a vast hall swarming alongside opponents descending from the ceiling. Beasts lunged towards the team, wearing them into immediate battle. Alongside rapid movements, Toru slashed down the attackers, protecting his new companions with precision. In the heat of combat, Toru cautioned Marianne to stay alert, urging her to keep her gaze open. Meanwhile, the fox-eared combatant summoned a wave of freezing sorcery to halt the enemy's proceed. Alongside sharp command, she cast icy spikes, piercing the beast's midair with deadly precision. Urara entered in, grappling an opponent and slamming it down alongside raw force. Toru encouraged Marianne, reminding her that might also required assurance to features Terror Skull on. He reassured Marianne, explaining that staying composed and watching opponent movements was key to triumph. Abruptly, a beast lunged at them, jaws wide open, but Toru stayed completely unfazed. Alongside a smooth motion, he caught the opponent's arm mid-assault and brought it down in one strike. A shockwave burst forth, clearing a route across the swarm alongside precise force. Encouraged, Marianne grinned and nodded, her terror covered by growing assurance. Kaede received encouragement from her companions, each one reminding her she wasn't solo in the clash. Alongside renewed resolve, the company advanced within the next hall, ready to face what lay ahead. Within, gigantic webs coated the pillars, signaling the companionship of a formidable opponent lurking close by. A giant spider like being charged at them, leading an immediate counterattack. Marianne stepped forward and pierced the beast alongside a fierce direct strike. Remained over the defeated spider, breath steady, victorious in her one-on-one combat. She proudly announced her tear-up, whereas the others rejoiced her progress and their own advancement. Energized, Marianne shoved forward, keen to proceed exploring regardless of Toru's cautious tone. Teasingly, Toru warned his fox-eared ally of her own impatient history, earning an embarrassed response. Alongside period remaining, Toru accepted to investigate deeper areas prior to returning to the surface. Marianne enthusiastically accepted to keep exploring, her enthusiasm lifting the company's spirits. Alongside Toru in the lead, the team carefully ventured into a narrow tunnel, alert for threat. Eventually, the route arrived to a stop. Toru verified they had arrived at a dead end. Anything about the barrier sensed unusual, prompting him to investigate further. Following a few tests, Toru stayed puzzled, unsure if they had missed something concealed. Toru drew a circle on the barrier, surprising everyone when a concealed portal started to open. Outside it lay a concealed hall flooded alongside old weapons, crates, and overgrown roots. Amid the artifacts, he discovered a pristine blade, untouched by rust regardless of its age. Amazed by the craftsmanship, Toru noted the technology sensed unusually advanced for the setting. They next spotted two enigmatic objects, an egg and a crystal resting quietly on a pedestal. Marianne provided to appraise the enigmatic protests, suggesting they might be linked to summoned beasts. Examining the mural, Toru and his ally discovered these were artificial beings created by an age-old race. The eggs had been preserved across sorcery, and could be reawakened alongside sufficient magical enthusiasm. Keen to try, Toru gripped one of the eggs, preparing to transfer his mana. A surge of glow burst. His sorcery had arrived at something well dormant within the relic. Resolved to succeed, Toru gripped the egg tightly, and announced he would take the process seriously. Abruptly, peculiar vapor burst about the hall, alarming the others as the environment began to change. Arara felt distortion in the space proper, whereas Marianne noted the magical density rising as if they were submerged in liquid. Toru steadied himself, feeling the egg react as enthusiasm pulsed across it. At last, the instant arrived. A burst of glow signaled the being's awakening. Toru and his ally stared in surprise as the egg started to shift, glow spilling from its form. What emerged wasn't terrifying but a fluffy, one-eyed being alongside an innocent gaze. Toru and his ally stumbled upon a peculiar floating being alongside a single eye, radiating an unusual aura. Regardless of their bewilderment, they grabbed it in, noting its soft form and harmless demeanor. The maiden rested on it playfully, shocked as the being supported her weight alongside ease. Realizing its potential, Toru proposed handling it for transport. Alongside a grin, he named the being Panda, officially welcoming it within their company. Panda was officially introduced to the company, swiftly gaining everyone's fondness alongside its charm. The being brought smiles and laughing, as the others admired its cuteness and soft companionship. Meanwhile, Toru examined an enigmatic egg-like object, intrigued by what it might admission. Within a grand estate, he discovered a concealed stash of formidable potions and scarce brews. Amid them was an ultra-scarce elixir, surprising even veteran experts alongside its unmatched value. Toru discovered of an sale gripped in the royal metropolis, a location where scarce items fetch high prices. Following finalizing an artifact deal, he received a gigantic sum from a merchant. The amount totaled a staggering 500 million, making all in awe. Even Panda joined the excitement as Toru marveled at his initial glimpse of white treasure currency. Afterward, an unexpected encounter in the bath guided to an unforeseen flustered moment. Toru was scolded following stumbling into an embarrassing instant, leading to a sharp smack from Kaede. The tension swiftly faded, and laughing echoed across the estate that night. Dawn's sunlight poured in as Toru welcomed a new morning, remembering on his period in the grand estate. His companions had grown mightier, and their travels proceeded with renewed strength and purpose. Reunited in the passage, Kaede and Panda greeted him kindly, ready for the next quest. An alert shattered the dawn, composed as something unforeseen triggered a reaction. Toru was greeted by known faces, their warmth easing the pressure in the air. Although tempted to stay, he acknowledged it was period to move forward. Memories of the history lingered in his spirit, reminding him of unfinished feelings. Resolved, Toru announced his next step and sail, prompted by a note from the Count. Katie was invited to join Toru on his travels, a proposal that stirred silent optimism within her. She seemed to the heavens, imagining the freedom such a trip might offer. A gentle grin masked her bittersweet thoughts as Toru quietly observed. Controlled by aristocrat duty, she understood her future might never be her own. Toru, ignorant of her inner conflict, thanked her sincerely prior to continuing onward. Thanks expanded across the air as the aristocrat parent expressed heartfelt thanks to Toru for saving his child's life. Preparing to leave, Toru assured everyone they'd meet once more, whereas Marianne struggled to hold back her feelings. Amazed, she embraced Kaede tightly, tears welling up as she admitted her sadness. Kaede softly promised they wouldn't forget her, presenting comfort and reassurance. Alongside a soft tone, Marianne questioned if they'd return. Toru offered his word, a silent promise to come back someday. A bittersweet grin, Marianne acknowledged her silent envy, hiding her sadness back grace. As the company collected at the gates, heartfelt farewells were exchanged in solemn stillness. Toru pivoted to Kaede, presenting a assured grin as they prepared to depart. Their people faded within the distance, observed by those they abandoned there. Travels resumed under open skies, the next goal waiting for just outside the town. Surprise expanded throughout their faces as bewilderment gripped the group, unable to comprehend what lay before them. Merely an empty plaza stayed where the labyrinth was supposed to be. Locals clarified its disappearance, revealing a person had defeated it weeks ago. Irritation boiled over, his opportunity to prove himself as a champion was gone. A gentle palm arrived out, yet those known gaze stirred unease deep within him. Lacking warning, fury erupted as he struck out violently, wearing her to the ground in fury. Cries burst about him, voices begging for him to stop prior to a person got seriously hurt. Eventually he let go. Concern moved to the injured maiden, who assured all she was fine. Gaze from the audience pivoted judgmental. Terror set in as whispers called for guards. Gripped by terror, he understood the command was slipping. Desperation flooded his gaze, blaming a fiend eye for losing his grip. Unease lingered as the company collected, bewilderment and fatigue weighing heavily following the recent disorder. Failing the stillness, resolve surfaced as he urged everyone to move, resolved to take responsibility. Afterward, they rested amid ruined gem blocks, tension easing but doubts gently growing. Discussion pivoted grave, strategy asked, and failure acknowledged as going back home was proposed as a new route forward. Fury flared at the believed of retreat, yet cause prevailed. A careful strategy turned necessary prior to taking different step. A suggestion sparked optimism, an unexplored region near Einark could revive their fading travels. Enthusiasm came back as everyone accepted, voices rising alongside renewed resolve to make their mark. Prior to their focus moved towards a known noble estate, a place of both promise and tension. Abruptly, surprise darkened in following learning something vital had already been claimed. Strategy unraveled instantly, nothing was departed to investigate, and their new goal collapsed prior to it even started. Report of the Manhwa Brigade's accomplishments amazed him, especially their downfall of a fiend commander. Marianne stepped into the hall alongside her usual grace, drawing focus immediately. Desire clouded his thoughts as he fixated on her body, thoughts growing disturbingly obsessive. Guided by longing, he invoked a force, shouted the demonic eye of seduction to take command. Anything disrupted his influence. Marianne stirred, resisting as sparks of force rushed within her. Terror rushed across his chest as his force failed, and pain struck back unexpectedly. A system notice unveiled the fact his sorcery had no effect due to the opponent's superior tier. Gaze opened as she remained unfazed, blade drawn and full awareness returning. Her gaze sharpened, demanding to know what he had just attempted to do. Terror amazed him, amazed by her speed, whereas different tone called out his name with quiet weight. Whereas cornered and humiliated, he was warned that divine support often aligns alongside effort, not entitlement. The Count spoke honestly, force and purity mattered more than declarations of destiny. Banished from the estate, he was cautioned to leave prior to facing further disgrace. Irritation boiled over as his attacks failed yet once more, regardless of calling his rank as hero. His companions, losing optimism, proposed going back home, his dream slipping further away alongside each breath. He announced a new course towards Armand, resolved to seek the Holy Blade despite objections. Guided by confidence and desperation, he clung to the belief that reclaiming force would restore everything he caught. A company of ferocious wyverns descended upon the remains, their roars ringing in the heavens. Toru issued a command, signaling his creature ally Rosuke to strike. The battlefield was shrouded in falling icicles. Alongside a formidable leap, Rosuke cast across the air, piercing opponent after enemy with deadly precision. As the last wyvern collapsed, Rosuke came back to Toru's side. Toru calmly complimented his rapid execution. They discussed Roske's force, noting how different he was from their initial creature, Panda. Roske's agile form soared upward, marking admiration. His sleek form resembled a veteran fighter, whereas observing, the maiden felt different creatures longing to prove itself. Toru was surprised by the sudden eagerness. Curiously, the two beings started interacting. Their movements sensed like a conversation, each responding alongside enthusiasm and intent. Lacking warning, both beasts cast within the heavens, darting upward in a spontaneous competition. Panda trailed back. Their friendly contest departed their companions impressed. Toru discovered Roske's flexibility, watching as the being extended like a rope throughout the remains. As his stomach growled, he proposed preparing a food, prompting agreement from his ally. Following remembering Roske into his ring, he started organizing their simple camp setup. Whereas setting things up, the fox-eared maiden hesitated, clearly wanting to speak. Alongside resolve, she stepped forward and questioned to be the one in charge of cooking this period. Toru accepted to let her handle the food, astonished that she had discovered cooking from a person else. Alongside confidence, she unveiled a frilly apron she'd bought during a history trip, asking for his opinion. Laid out prior to her were strange ingredients, raising questions about whether any of it was actually edible. Lacking any delay, she started preparing, starting alongside a gigantic, grotesque frog suspended over the pot. One by one, she added disturbing components: mandrakes, herbs, and unnoticed items following a method merely she understood. Toru observed in sheer surprise as she repeated the identical steps, muttering enthusiastically whereas preparing the food. The contents of the pot bubbled ominously, casting uncertainty over whether it was even edible. Regardless of his delay, Toru agreed the dish she provided with visible unease. Alongside cautious resolve, he felt it whereas she nervously awaited his response. To his surprise, the strange-looking dish pivoted out to be incredibly delicious. Amazed by delight, the maiden sprang into Toru's arms mid-food, clinging to him alongside fondness whereas he struggled to balance his bowl. She nuzzled close, inhaling his scent alongside delight, declaring her devotion. Whereas eating, he saw her tail swaying energetically. The instant his palm created contact, she flinched. Toru, amused by the tail's softness, barely saw her shocked response. Embarrassed, she seemed up at him alongside dazed gaze, whispering his identify in a tone that created his heart skip. Stillness darkened as she leaned closer, their gaze locking alongside a tension neither expected. Shadowy thoughts surfaced, memories of treachery, guilt, and whispered accusations haunting his thoughts. Voices warned him of what she could be created to do, warping the meaning of companionship. Her kindness slashed across the noise, presenting more meal alongside a bright smile that softened his thoughts. Gripping his resolve, he shoved longing aside. She deserved regard, not command. An unexpected movement in the heavens caught their focus as she shouted out in alarm. Multiple wyverns descended from overhead, drawn by the lingering scent of cooked meal. Rather than terror, assurance displayed as he summoned Roske, keen to test his strength. Alongside a single command, he signaled the assault, facing the threat skull on. Roske soared into combat, piercing across opponents alongside unmatched precision and speed. Watching Roske unleash destruction alongside ease, he could not avoid wonder if such force was genuinely normal. Speculation trailed. Perhaps the bond between them, or his unusual role, amplified the creature's might. Following cleaning up, they journeyed onward, eventually reaching the lofty walls of the metropolis capital. Bustling roads, curious shops, and explorers flooded the vibrant marketplace as they explored Armand's wonders. Whereas she seemed about excitedly, he concentrated on their task, delivering an important note to Count Roan's contact. Their goal was linked to a renowned merchant, well connected throughout the metropolis. Abruptly, an explosion rocked the outskirts, drawing everyone's focus towards the disturbance. A gigantic horned creature pulling a wagon had gone berserk, crashing across the region in a frenzy. Whereas onlookers panicked, they stayed composed, analyzing the creature's species and behavior calmly. Prior to either could act, two boastful mercenaries stepped in, arrogantly claiming the task of subduing the creature themselves. Onlookers cheered alongside relief, believing the arrival of the renowned Saul brothers mattered salvation. Regardless of Kade's offer to intervene, her owner allowed the fighters to try, curious, perhaps, or amused by their confidence. Lacking any delay, the brothers charged, confronting the wild creature's skull on alongside clear assurance. One managed to grab hold of the reins, resolved to prove their might, but raw force amazed their effort, launching both fighters across the air in dramatic failure. Terror expanded throughout the field as the raging creature veered toward a nearby home. Terrified residents screamed, realizing the being would shortly crash within their house. Lacking any delay, Toru stepped forward, telling Kaede to stand down whereas he grabbed charge. Concentrated and composed, he extended his palm, preparing to confront the oncoming force skull on. Force rushed as he halted the creature's charge, holding the gigantic being back with sheer strength. Crowds gasped, amazed by what they'd just witnessed, a single male halting a rampaging creature. Whereas the Saul brothers groaned in the dirt, Toru calmly guided the creature back, unharmed. A pat on the being's skull and a few kind remarks deserved grateful smiles from close-by residents. Moments afterward, he neared a merchant, asking about the male named Jonathan Rockbell. Recognition trailed word of his deed had by now arrived at the merchant guild's inner ranks. Within a well-furnished hall, a stern male introduced himself as Jonathan Rockbell, president of the trading company. Toru handed over Count Roan's note, which Jonathan examined alongside curiosity and a measured tone. Following reading, he identified Toru and acknowledged the reputation he had built in Einark. Approval trailed. Jonathan accepted to esteem the Count's request, intrigued by Toru's modest reasoning. Nevertheless, when questioned about details, he withheld the reply alongside a knowing smirk. Timing wasn't right yet. Jonathan asked for more period prior to revealing anything, asking Toru to return the following evening alongside preparations made. Departed alongside vague instructions and doubts, Toru accepted, uncertain about what awaited him next. Royal Metropolis gleamed behind the moonlight as an important gathering was ready to start within the castle. Toru, dressed formally for the occasion, remained alongside his ally. Although uncomfortable in stiff garments, he readied for what lay forward. Arriving at the castle courtyard, Toru and the maiden were greeted by the sight of an aristocrat carriage and a waiting escort. An older male alongside authority emerged, recognizing Toru instantly and welcoming him, lacking any delay within the royal estate. The carriage shortly departed across the silent roads, heading deeper within the spirit of the kingdom behind the night sky. Within the moving carriage, the older aristocrat instructed them to keep their goal mystery. Toru and his ally listened cautiously. He clarified the person they would meet gripped high profile and couldn't speak freely alongside commoners, which clarified the secrecy. As the carriage rolled across the silent evening, Toru started to understand. This was not an offhand visit, it was a concealed audience. Toru stayed composed, choosing to hear the cause for the meeting. The aristocrat assured him it would be greatly beneficial. Eventually the carriage arrived at a remote fortress nestled in the mountains, its isolated grandeur hinting at the importance of their task. Toru stepped out of the carriage as the entrance unsealed. Sentinels and servants remained ready to receive the guests. Escorted within, they climbed a grand staircase and were informed to wait prior to a heavy portal leading deeper within the estate. Within a luxurious hall, Toru rested gently, realizing he was ready to meet a person alongside high authority. Unlike anyone he'd faced prior to, the portal unsealed, an imposing male stepped into, flanked by knights. It was nobody other than Monarch Armand himself. He started the meeting, clarifying it was unofficial. Toru understood this encounter was important and not lacking consequences. Monarch Armand eventually unveiled his purpose. He summoned Toru not for formality, but for a task that merely he could fulfill. Alongside a stern look, the monarch clarified that the imperial metropolis faced a grave threat looming over them. Toru asked for clarity, sensing that the task involved something well outside a normal explorer's duty. The monarch replied directly. He wished Toru to eliminate a monstrous being famous as the Death Ant Empress. Faced alongside the scale of the threat, Toru asked the logic, realizing the fiend's force rivaled whole armies. Monarch Armand acknowledged that the kingdom's military forces were by now weakened and incapable of handling the threat solo. He unveiled that close-by villages had by now been consumed by the Death Ants, making nothing back but ruin. Formally, these beings started their assault. They wouldn't stop until everything was ruined, including the imperial metropolis. Faced alongside urgency, the monarch demanded in reply. Toru, nevertheless, initially sought clarity before giving any commitment. Lacking any delay, Toru offered his reply. Alongside clear assurance and resolve, he agreed the task to eliminate the looming threat. To prize result, the monarch provided Toru aristocrat profile, land, and even the rank of hero. Toru, however, declined the glory. Alternatively, he asked for funds as compensation. The monarch proposed a prize of 100 million, which Toru agreed without any delay. Although astonished by Toru's disinterest in titles, the monarch accepted. He arranged for a corps commander to guide them to the Death Ant nest. Toru clarified his reasoning. He preferred a short profile, and alongside his ally, he merely wished to enjoy their travels peacefully. As dawn stood up over the royal fortress, preparations were by now underway. The task would start alongside the initial glow of morning. The team stepped into a lush and vibrant woods, mesmerized by the natural beauty surrounding them as sunlight filtered across the trees. Nevertheless, signs of devastation shortly emerged. Defeated troops and strewn weapons marked the path, confirming the danger was near. Their guide cautioned of the Death Ant's deadly reputation, causing bewilderment and concern when Kade displayed unfamiliarity alongside the threat. Toru reflected on Keide's unusual gaps in knowledge, wondering about her history and what existence she had prior to joining him. Lacking warning, a company of armed people emerged from the trees, surrounding the company and halting their advancement deeper within the woods. From the shadows of the trees, a swarm of monstrous demise ants emerged, their glowing gaze and skeletal forms radiating menace. Toru swiftly assessed the circumstance. Amid on all sides, he verified to Kaede that these were indeed the opponents they were sent to eliminate. Tension escalated. Doubts arose as the sheer number of beasts amazed the guide, who asked whether the monarch had chosen poorly. Prior to delay could expanded further, the company readied their weapons. The opponent charged, and combat erupted across the forest clearing. Lacking delay, Toru unleashed a formidable strike. The devastating force tore across the death ants, scattering people and rubble in all guidance. Perched on a trunk stump, Kaede unleashed a formidable incantation. Her incantation air press sent a spiraling force ripping across the battlefield. The assault struck alongside tremendous impact, creating a blast zone that hurled the death ants within the air and strewn them instantly. Watching from close by, the trooper was departed amazed. He couldn't believe the overwhelming force she had displayed so easily. Formerly the dust darkened. The aftermath was clear. A gigantic pit covered the formerly crowded battleground, currently silent and cleared of threats. Toru moved focus to their next task. Alongside visibility yet a challenge, Kaede provided to used wide region sorcery to aid their search. Standing atop a stump, Kaede summoned enormous twin tornadoes, their winds tearing across the trees. The twin storms froze the landscape in one instant, encasing the battlefield in lofty shards of frost that glittered behind the sunlight. Staring at the icy aftermath, their guide was departed wordless. Toru grinned as Kaede apologized, admitting she overdid the incantation's force. As they surveyed the icy terrain, the cold air bit within them. The guide, amazed, questioned to return, feeling he could offer no further help. Kaede and Toru neared a gigantic, jagged hole in the center of the frost. Its narrow shape and unstable edges hinted at the threat waiting for within. Whereas discussing strategies, Toru concluded that reaching the Empress's nest directly would be more efficient than attacking from overhead. Kaede considered wielding sorcery, but the depth was uncertain. A look at his profile unveiled an overlooked option. He wielded a dungeon core with level 3 authority. Curious, Toru wondered if placing the labyrinth here might reshape the region. The notion increased mightier as he examined his interface, confirming the labyrinth was indeed available. Alongside resolve, he activated the technique. Glow burst around them, signaling the dungeon's successful deployment. Prior to them, a lofty building emerged from the icy earth. Toru had pivoted the battlefield into a labyrinth, granting them full command and access within. Toru initiated the transfer command, instantly warping both himself and Kaede from the icy surface to the gateway of the newly formed labyrinth. Within the throne hall, the Death Ant Empress burst in fury. Amid by her sentinels, she demanded to know who had violated her nest. Observing her size and tone, Toru verified she was the Empress. Kaede, noticing her fury, kept her protect up, lacking speaking further. The Empress offered an enraged command, ordering her troops to rip the intruders apart and deliver their remains in tribute. Prior to the assault could escalate, a rapid magical strike obliterated the initial wave of sentinels. The Empress observed in surprise as her minions fell instantly. Kaede's prior assault departed a trail of defeated insect troops. The enraged Empress wept over the corpses, vowing vengeance whereas scavenging their remains. To the company's horror, she consumed her defeated youngsters. The gruesome act triggered a rapid increase in her might as her force rushed unnaturally. Boasting a new tier of 86, the Empress announced personally invincible, even heroes would fail prior to her, she insisted. Remaining composed, Toru stepped forward and informed Kaede to fall back. He would handle the clash himself and finish what they started. Lacking warning, the Empress hit. Her devastating assault broke gem walls, marking the beginning of a brutal confrontation between her and Toru. Toru narrowly avoided the Empress's strike, acknowledging her speed. She cast different assault, wearing him to remain alert. The Empress countered alongside a devastating incantation, wielding high-tier sorcery to trap Toru within a towering column of ice. Kaede observed in stillness as the Empress announced triumph, assuming Toru had been overcome and mocking his silence. Nevertheless, Toru emerged unscathed. Alongside a assured grin, he braced for the real clash ahead. Concealed back lofty gem, Toru waits as the opponent looms forward, a fearsome spider-like fiend guarding the hall. The counterattack is about to begin. Alongside explosive force, he bursts upward, tearing across the rock ceiling. Resolve sharpens his gaze as he propels himself towards the confrontation. Dust settles as Toru lands in front of the beast. Shocked, the being freezes, recognizing the threat currently standing prior to her. Rather than falter, she questions his identity, sensing something abnormal. Toru answers lacking any delay, declaring himself nothing more than a combatant. The fiend strikes back, summoning jagged crystals from the earth. Blocked by the eruption, Toru pulls back, weighing his next move cautiously. Opponent unleashes a stream of acid towards Toru, her look flooded with vicious delight. Jumping aside, he narrowly avoids the corrosive spray. As it dissolves the pillar back him, he identifies the substance, highly deadly formic acid. From her position, the beast fires different barrage. Acid rains down throughout the battlefield, scattering in sharp arcs as Toru stays on the move. Toru soars overhead, staying airborne whereas dodging different blast. Underneath him, the spider lady adjusts her aim, desperate to strike him mid-air. Balanced atop a tall pillar, Toru surveys the battlefield, calmly analyzing the circumstance. He jokes to himself about the acid's effect on his garments prior to preparing to counter. Force surges about Toru as he draws enthusiasm into his form, preparing for a decisive move. The gale whirls violently in reply to his focus. Throughout the hall, the spider fiend braces for impact. Her assured look twists into surprise as cracks start to form beneath her. A rout of destruction tears across the battlefield, making broke tiles and ruptured gem in its wake. He lands in a crouch, blade raised, unfazed by the assault. The composed in his gaze reflects his total command of the circumstance. Alongside the threat assessed and his target cornered, Toru declares the battle's end. His next strike will show no delay. Understanding dawns on the Empress as terror overtakes her confidence. Regardless of her profile as a Tier 100 beast, she admits her inferiority to the human before her. Guided by fury, she unleashes an enraged charge, her tone roaring across the hall as she prepares a deadly attack. Crystal shards erupt between them, flooding the hall alongside destructive force. Toru faces the onslaught skull on, unwavering in his stance. Lacking terror, he leaps from pillar to pillar, gracefully evading the destruction underneath. The Empress watches, amazed by his accuracy. In desperation, she launches different assault, her claws stretching towards him at blinding speed as he closes in. Toru maneuvers mid-air alongside flawless agility, evading the Empress's deadly assault. Blades of enthusiasm twist about him, but nobody find their mark. Amazed, the Empress freezes as her strike misses completely. Shock spreads throughout her features as she realizes he's by now closing in. Alongside a single decisive motion, Toru brings his blade down. The blow lands clean, slicing across her in one instant. Limbs scatter as the Empress's form collapses, severed and overcame. Toru lands in a ready stance, by now changing away from the wreckage. Standing tall, he confirms the end of the task. Back him, the beast lies motionless. Request completed. Alongside the Empress overcame, Toru receives a towel from Kaide as she praises his effort. He thanks her whereas she wonders about the labyrinth's deeper levels. A map of the labyrinth materializes, revealing other areas. Toru clumsily taps into its controls whereas Kaide questions the scope of his authority as labyrinth owner. Surprisingly, it seems the beasts are by now clearing the remaining threats on their own. Toru watches the sight unfold alongside amusement. Abruptly, the Empress's severed skull awakens, shrieking about vengeance. Toru reacts in sheer surprise at her survival. Kaide swiftly picks up the talking skull, deciding to store it away in magical container. Toru casually approves the strategy alongside a thumbs up. Dawn glow shines down on the capital, tranquil and calm. The threat has passed. Within the association, Toru delivers proof of the Queen's downfall. The guild master examines the severed skull, impressed by Toru's work and reputation. Grateful, the official acknowledges how close the army arrived to losing optimism. Toru's timely intervention pivoted the tide. Remembering on the task, Toru realizes the Count likely intended for him to handle it from the start. Regardless, the metropolis was rescued. From a rooftop site, the municipality is safe, formally more. Toru is promised a grand prize for saving the whole country. Toru reflects on the rewards he deserved, connections to formidable people, and generous compensation. The task had exceeded all expectations. An unexpected notice warns him to prepare. Footsteps echo in the hallway as a company approaches. Toru questions the association's motives. Troops enter the hall and identify him as part of the Manga brigade. Their expressions are grave, causing Toru to stay alert. They raise their arms swiftly, pressure thick in the air as Toru instinctively braces for conflict. Alternatively of attacking, they bow deeply in thanks. Their commander asks to greet him properly, making Toru shocked by the respectful gesture. Chants echo across the metropolis as crowds cheer for Toru, the champion who rescued their homeland. His identity spreads alongside admiration. At a grand fortress, troops gossip alongside awe. Whispers of Kaide's beauty and the Manga brigade's force ripple across the royal court. Within, nobles debate her companionship, some captivated, others critical. A warning silences them. Regard must be shown under royal authority. Toru and Kaide enter in formal attire, walking side by side, behind beams of glow. All gaze focus on them. The monarch's tone booms from the throne, demanding stillness as the hall prepares for their royal audience. Monarch Armand sits on his throne, preparing to deliver an important announcement to the collected court. His companionship solo commands stillness and focus. Alongside solid authority, the monarch calls for Toru Iban and Keita Tamamo to step forward. The court watches as the two approach the royal platform. Toru kneels prior to the monarch. Regardless of the army's previous work, the monarch acknowledges the downfall of the Death Ant Empress as an extraordinary feat. Grateful, the monarch expresses how dire the circumstance could have been lacking their help. Toru and Kaida remain composed in their reply. Alongside sincerity, Monarch Armand thanks them on behalf of the whole kingdom, recognizing their vital role in preserving calm. Prior to the Grand Hall, Toru and Kaida modestly acknowledge the monarch's praise, their heads bowed in regard as the court watches in stillness. Lacking warning, a retainer wheels in a gigantic sum 700 million in treasure bars. Toru and Kaide react alongside visible surprise at the reward's scale. Monarch Armand calmly explains the gesture is merely a part of his thanks. Toru accepts it alongside composure, hiding his astonishment. The monarch proposes an honorary rank for their company, the Menu Brigade. From currently on, the team shall be officially recognized as heroes. He clarifies that the rank is voluntary. Toru may pass it on or decline in the future, granting him full autonomy over the esteem. Toru hesitated briefly, but agreed the monarch's proposal alongside a modest nod, recognizing the weight of the rank provided to him. Afterward, Kaide blushed as she reaffirmed her devotion, reminding Toru of their bond forged across battles and faith. Report of the Menu Brigade's return expanded. Although honored, Toru braced for the renown's consequences. Whereas taking a mouthful of fruit, Toru overheard report of a labyrinth discovered near the metropolis. The information caught his curiosity instantly. A company of explorers verified it was an unexplored zone, rumored to be deadly and well outside the reach of average challengers. Toru understood the potential. A difficult labyrinth mattered renown, and scarce items dropped by beasts added value to the risk. Lacking any delay, the team accepted to investigate. Their next goal was decided. They set off within the woods, the concealed labyrinth waiting somewhere forward, shrouded in quiet mystery. The company emerged from the woods into an open expanse where the landscape moved unnaturally. A gigantic tower loomed in the distance. Campfires burned throughout the region, revealing crowds of explorers who had collected alongside hopes of entering the labyrinth. Wielding his technique, Toru scanned the others and discovered they were all short tier and posed no threat. He swiftly caught curiosity. Resolved to outpace the rest, the company marched confidently towards the labyrinth, keen to claim fame. Nevertheless, formerly within, an unnoticed companionship startled them all with its terrifying size and sudden appearance. A formidable company of orcs emerged, their levels well outside anything Toru had ever encountered. One remained at an overwhelming tier 52. Taken by surprise, the team scrambled. Sora collapsed, unable to clash, whereas bewilderment expanded amid the others over the orcs' unforeseen might. Lacking warning, a gigantic blow sent Sane crashing within the barrier, making Toru amazed by the unexpected brutality of the enemy. As disorder shattered out, flame sorcery clashed alongside blades. The orcs rushed forward, pressing the party into desperate combat. Amid the turmoil, one member stepped forward, preparing to unleash a mystery arms in a final offer for survival. Toru summoned a surge of force as his ally offered the order. Lacking any delay, he cast a devastating lightning incantation at the approaching opponents. The blast hit the orcs alongside full force, surrounding them in arcs of electricity. For an instant, it appeared like a decisive triumph. Alternatively, the orcs stayed standing, laughing off the assault. Toru stared in sheer surprise, realizing the sorcery had no effect at all. Out of enthusiasm, he pivoted to Lisa for backup. She stepped forward, preparing an incantation of her own dream sorcery. As the orcs advanced across magical barriers, unaffected, their resilience sent a chilling notice they were still from ordinary. The team desperately tried to slow their advance. Lisa used Earth Barrier, hoping a barrier would buy them period. The barrier burst from the level, sealing the passage. Toru urged the team to regroup, but the orcs started failing across alongside brute force. Terror set in as Toru commanded a retreat. Lisa was tasked alongside carrying Sora, who stayed unconscious. Arguments flared in the disorder. Formerly outdoors, the team collapsed in weariness. Although they had escaped, their morale was shaken, and injuries were evident. Irritation boiled over. Toru struck out, blaming his companions for their failure. Guilt and tension hung in the air, menacing to fracture the company. Toru's outburst drew focus, and he swiftly tried to compose himself. Apologies were exchanged, but unease lingered between the team members. He reflected on their previous might, remembering how Toru used to lead alongside composed and strategy. Their cohesion had crumbled since his departure. Close-by explorers came back from a successful labyrinth run, boasting about their advancement. Their assurance contrasted sharply alongside Sane's struggling team. Lisa proposed asking the other company for help, but Sane declined. His confidence wouldn't allow him to admit weakness. In mystery, he chose different route, one of violence and theft, planning to eliminate the mightier team and steal their spoils. Assured in his might, he lunged alongside the intent to kill, but something unforeseen caught his eye. The trio rested in a circle, each of them crouched oddly. Bewilderment darkened in as Sane hesitated, realizing something wasn't right. Prior to he could react, a horrid understanding hit him literally. He was amazed by a disgusting smell and a horrific sight that departed him amazed and gagging. Still from the sight, the rest of his company saw the stench too. Nobody could explain its source as it increased mightier in the air. Moments afterward, Sane came back ash-faced, overcame, and silent. A maiden greeted him mockingly, pointing out his late arrival. Sane's return was nothing brief of a calamity. Covered in filth and unable to see clearly, he wept out in agony as his failed ambush departed him humiliated. His companions recoiled instantly. The stench clinging to him was unbearable, and even his companions questioned him to keep his distance until he cleaned himself up. Frustrated and ashamed, Sane shouted within the heavens. Alongside no other option, he was informed to wash off in the sea prior to rejoining the company. Meanwhile, still away in the metropolis of Armand, a grand estate hosted a high-class event. Elegance and refinement expanded across the air. Within, nobles collected behind the soft glow of chandeliers. At the lavish venue, a masked male agreed a beverage from a passing attendant alongside Grace. Sitting alongside a refined lady, he admired the high-class setting. She clarified the estate belonged to one of the metropolis's most formidable marquises, justifying the extravagant quality. Their conversation was interrupted by an unexpected release of a magical seal, revealing a floating being. As they spoke, he verified they were at an sale home. The lady stayed cautious, preferring to observe prior to acting. Elsewhere, Count Roan came unannounced at a silent residence. Hearing the knock, the male within remained to greet him, ignorant of the deeper events happening outside that portal. A warm cup of coffee was served as the male and Count Roan rested alongside in silent conversation. Roan expressed his thanks, presenting a gift in return for the male's act of saving his child. Curious about the maiden, the male questioned for her. Roan clarified she stayed back to proceed her training, preparing for her future as a nobleman's wife. Alongside a sly grin, Roan hinted that even a commoner pivoted champion could marry into nobility. The champion seemed puzzled but listened closely. As he remained to leave, Roan offered a cryptic farewell. The notice was clear: the champion's future was entwined alongside more than just renown. Prior to making, Count Roan extended an offer. He proposed attending an upcoming sale, hinting that it might admission something worthwhile. The following evening, the grand sale hall arrived to existence. Wealthy nobles and masked bidders flooded the hall, their voices hushed alongside anticipation. Clarified the simple rules: highest offer wins. The male observed quietly, intrigued yet cautious, unsure what he'd find amid the audience. A gigantic diamond was unveiled. Initial bids flew rapidly, climbing from thousands to hundreds of thousands within seconds. Amazed, the observer understood how quickly fortunes shifted in this realm. Number 56 insisted the jewel for 230,000, making him wordless at the scale of force among the upper class. The next object presented was unlike the rest, a scarce scroll stated to block abilities. The host emphasized its potential to paralyze opponents alongside terror. Excitement rippled across the audience as bidding unsealed alongside a jaw-dropping starting price of 1 million. Lacking any delay, the masked male raised his palm and provided the full amount. No one else offered. The scroll was his. Back at their seat, his ally questioned about the scroll's significance. He clarified it was an artifact of the age-old species, formidable and impossible to reproduce. Next object amazed the hall once more: a existence extension potion skilled of saving the user from death once. The bidding for the existence extension potion finished at a staggering 850 million. Surprise flooded the hall. Next arrived a high elf, an extremely scarce species presented as a slave. The audience was captivated by her beauty and rarity, sparking intense murmurs. Different scarce specimen trailed a tiny caged being. It was sold for $500 million to bidder number 9, making the masked male clearly surprised. As the next object was brought out, the auctioneer introduced it alongside Flair. The guests collapsed silent in curiosity. Within the cage was a sprite, part of a secretive race living far in the forests. A sprite rested gently in a cage, displayed as the sale's most valuable highlight. Her companionship stirred excitement amid the guests. As the bidding escalated, the masked male abruptly learned a faint tone. Although Keita denied speaking, he stayed unsettled. The tone increased clearer, pleading for help. Lights swirled about the table. He understood no one else could hear it. Looking towards the cage, he recognized the source. The sprite was speaking directly to him, and merely him. At a grand sale, a caged sprite pleaded for help as bidders competed alongside lofty sums. Her shout for rescue pierced across the noise, capturing Toru's focus. Toru remained icy, gaze narrowing as he recognized the sprite's desperate tone. Her terror arrived at him through the bars of her prison. Lacking any delay, Toru raised his palm and shouted a staggering offer: 600 million. His tone silenced the hall, shocking the audience. He calmly assessed his opponents, noting their stillness. They had exhausted their funds. The advantage was his, but a smug stranger raised the stakes to 630 million, resolved not to let the sprite go so effortlessly. The male grinned wickedly, fantasizing about torturing the sprite for his own amusement. His tone echoed alongside cruelty and intent to break her spirit. Watching from back, Toru tightened his hand, disgusted by the male's remarks. Resolved, he vowed not to let the maiden fall into such vile palms. The bidding war intensified. As numbers skyrocketed, Toru shoved his offer higher, surpassing 800 million. Sweat collected on his brow. Startled by the male's persistence, he asked how still his opponent would go. Alongside unwavering conviction, Toru slammed the table and announced one final offer: 1 billion, stunning the whole hall into stillness. Toru's bold declaration shook the hall. The auctioneer repeated his offer, but no one dared to conflict the overwhelming offer. Alongside the final call, the sale was sealed. Toru, identified as Mr. 31, was awarded the sprite for 1 billion, lacking further contest. Within the cage, the sprite observed close by, yet uncertain but clearly shaken. Her silent gaze reflected a mix of terror and cautious hope. As the excitement died down, the host addressed the audience, signaling the official end of the night's intense bidding. Spotlight fixed on him, the announcer invited final remarks. The event was closing, but for Toru, a new chapter had just started. Following winning the sale, Toru raised his palm to speak. Although he had no requests, he provided to sell a scarce object prior to the event ended. Invited to the stage, Toru placed 2 vials on display. The host examined them curiously, mistaking them for high-grade potions. Correcting the assumption, Toru announced that the vials weren't potions, but genuine elixirs, items of extraordinary rarity and force. Gasps expanded throughout the hall. Elixirs, skilled of instantly healing even mortal wounds, were famous as top-tier healing items. When questioned for confirmation, Toru asked for an on-the-spot appraisal. The staff accepted, and the scroll's glow started to admission the fact. As the sale concluded, Toru raised his palm one final period. Rather than a request, he announced he had an object to sell. He stepped onto the stage alongside his ally, presenting 2 vials. The host asked whether it was a high potion. Toru corrected him calmly: it wasn't just a potion. What he gripped was a genuine elixir, a top-tier magical medicine. Gasps flooded the hall. An elixir's value was unmatched. It could revive the dying and regenerate limbs in 1 instant. The appraiser verified its authenticity, clearly impressed. Bidders started to murmur, and the enthusiasm in the hall moved once more. Whereas reviewing the payment, Toru asked for the cost of the sprite be subtracted from the elixir sale. The deduction departed him alongside 2.15 billion. He gently reflected on his fortune, realizing his wealth had nearly doubled from where he started. The amount sensed unreal. Lacking delay, the host presented the cage. Ownership had officially transferred, and the sprite was currently under Toru's protection. Sitting within, the sprite emerged wary but curious. Her look displayed she yet didn't fully understand Toru's intentions. Moments afterward, Toru pivoted to Kaede alongside a gentle grin. Noting her transformation, he commented on how much she had shifted. Under a crescent moonlight, Toru's silent home remained on a hill, amid by composed and shadow, presenting caution for the night ahead. Within, he urged the sprite to come out of the cage. Calmly he reassured her, insisting she had nothing to terror. Although yet cautious, she held her arms and cautioned toward trusting humans. Toru acknowledged her delay without pushing further. Kaede brought tea to ease the tension. Toru pivoted back to offer the sprite something to beverage, keeping the tone gentle. Mentioning the cookies they'd bought prior, he observed as her gaze opened. Her defenses wavered for the initial period. Whereas sitting on the level, the sprite eventually felt a cookie. Tears welled in her gaze as she admitted it was delicious. Observing the shift, Kaede noted the sprite's subtle shift in behavior. Toru grinned, sensing she was beginning to faith them. When questioned why he bought her, Toru clarified he had learned to tone her tone, crying for help, and it arrived at him like a prayer. The sprite abruptly panicked. Realizing he had learned her plea, she dropped to her knees and begged forgiveness for her prior behavior. Bewildered by her response, Toru questioned what she mattered. She referred to him as a worm male, and appeared amazed by his presence among humans. Toru was puzzled by the unexpected revelation. The sprite cheerfully announced that her master was a worm, making Kaede equally amazed. Following a quick appraisal, Kaede verified it was true Toru was a worm male, yet he was unsure if that was something to worry about. He acknowledged he never saw since he advanced up too quickly. Kaede clarified that worm fighters were once an advanced race, now considered rare. The sprite introduced personally as Frau from the sprite tribe. Grateful for his help, she pledged personally to him regardless of Toru presenting her freedom. Tears welled in her gaze as she admitted her fears. Going back solo would bring her guilt and ridicule. Toru's companionship offered her purpose. Standing confidently, Frau announced personally a Tier 30 combatant. Regardless of her size and body, she maintained she was powerful enough to be by Toru's side. Abruptly, a peculiar floating being emerged prior to them. Startled, Frau questioned what the white round being was. Toru introduced it casually. It was named Panda. Frau chuckled at the odd identify, finding it both funny and endearing. As Panda and Frau playfully darted about the hall, Kaede watched their enthusiasm alongside amusement. Toru accepted they were a busy pair. Afterward that evening, Toru was awakened in bed by a peculiar sensation. He groaned, bewildered by the tiny figure curled up alongside him. Toru awoke up bewildered, and lifted the sleeping sprite from his chest, wondering how she finished up there. Afterward that dawn, Kaede greeted him as usual. Neither had seen Frau, prompting Kaede to ask Panda if he understood her whereabouts. Whereas eating breakfast, Toru clarified that Frau had snuck into his bed. They discussed their strategy, estimating a week well stay in the metropolis. Abruptly, Frau rested up on top of Panda, shocked and disoriented. Toru calmly stated they had no set goal, but preferred to investigate scarce sites. Frau turned emotional upon remembering her rescue. Toru, smiling, questioned her to drop the formal speech, preferring a more relaxed tone between them. During breakfast, Frau asked why Kaede could use honorifics if Toru didn't like them. Toru clarified that he allowed it since it sensed natural. Frau, frustrated, maintained it was just as natural for her. She warned him that he was her master, so wielding respectful language created sense. Regardless of his request, Frau declined to stop. She insisted her family would punish her for calling him by identify. Shifting the topic, Toru proposed they decide on their next goal. Watching Frau and Kaede laugh alongside, he grinned, glad they were getting along. Alongside unexpected enthusiasm, Frau leaped forward and proposed a new notion visiting the fairy village. Frau clarified that her settlement was far in the Grigot woods, nestled within the neighboring country. Curious about the meal, Toru questioned what they could expect. Frau excitedly recommended the local delicacies, especially the scarce sprite bee honey. Smiling alongside approval, Toru announced their next goal, the sprite settlement. The company's plan was officially set in motion. Frau, nevertheless, provided a grave warning. Fairies generally disliked humans, and there was an opportunity they could be assaulted upon arrival. Toru chuckled, brushing off the concern alongside clear assurance. Kaede added playfully that they'd probably be fine, whereas Frau remained bewildered by their casual behavior. Frau passionately cautioned Toru not to underestimate sprite warriors. Regardless of their size, they could grow mightier than most humans in combat. As they discussed strategy for the morning, Kaede proposed heading to the association for quests. Toru accepted, and the company chose it was period to get back into outside. Sunlight bathed the tall association structure as they neared. It remained proud and busy behind the clear heavens, a hub for explorers. Alongside resolve in their gaze, the trio Toru, Kaede, and Frau stepped into the association hall. Onlookers pivoted, recognizing the assured group. Within, whispers expanded swiftly. Explorers identified them as the greatsword combatant and beast girl, piquing curiosity. Within the association hall, a pair of excited girls neared Toru's company, asking if they were the famous Menu Brigade. Within moments, the audience swarmed them. Fans begged for autographs, handshakes, and even marriage proposals, overwhelming the trio alongside admiration. Toru was puzzled by the disorder. Amid by cheers and praises, Frau asked why no one had cautioned her that her owner was so popular. Shortly, the association commander personally greeted them. He unveiled that the Manu Brigade had been promoted outside B status. They were currently recognized as national heroes. Embarrassed by the grand welcome, Toru whispered to Kaede to create a glow orb for a quick leave. Kaede unleashed a blinding orb of glow, momentarily stunning all in the association hall, creating the perfect distraction for their escape. As the audience scrambled and shouted, The menu brigade disappeared. Bewildered association members rushed outdoors but discovered only their footprints. From the rooftop, Toru and his companions seemed down, amused by the disorder. They accepted the association might be too outside currently. Choosing to relax at home, Kaede provided to bake. Toru mentioned her cooking skills, whereas Frau eagerly anticipated the food. Still from the capital, a rugged canyon stretched under a harsh sun. Jagged rocks pierced the heavens, casting well shadows throughout the barren earth. Toru stepped forward and raised his palm. As he summoned his liquid sorcery, the air rippled alongside enthusiasm. His ally observed in stillness, her gaze fixed on the distant terrain. A torrent of liquid burst from Toru's palm, crashing within the rocky cliffs forward. The force broke the gem, sending rubble flying. The explosion blanketed the region in dust. Visibility dropped instantly as rocks rained down. Lacking any delay, Toru kicked up a new incantation. His next move sent a wave of earth forward, shielding them. Regardless of the destruction caused so still, Toru stayed unsatisfied. His ally urged caution, but he shoved forward, channeling more enthusiasm within the earth as the terrain quaked behind them. In reply, a formidable whirlwind burst. The warping force shot upward, dragging rocks and dust into its gigantic spiral, reshaping the battlefield entirely. Toru felt a shift in the air. Gale sorcery rushed unexpectedly, catching both him and his ally off protect. The swirling gust intensified, disrupting their stance. As the vortex expanded, rubble erupted in all guidance. Toru remained his earth, shielding his partner as disorder burst around them. Unfazed by the destruction, Toru examined the aftermath alongside dissatisfaction. Toru readied for different attempt, but his ally swiftly protested. Regardless of her profile, she voiced concern over the reckless nature of his sorcery. He clarified his force confidently, boasting of his elemental range and limitless mana. Nevertheless, she emphasized the instability of his casting, warning of potential harm. Summoning flame, Toru shaped a blazing blade alongside enthusiasm. The close by being flinched as the blade sparked violently. The flare scorched the air, shocking those close by. Whereas Toru apologized, his careless incantation had by now stirred terror. Abruptly, floating messages emerged. The labyrinth close by had increased in tier, catching everyone off guard. Report expanded of a scarce labyrinth increasing in difficulty. Toru understood it was the identical location where they had formerly defeated the Death Ants. Terror set in as the dungeon's rapid progress amazed him. His floating ally casually commented that his actions suited a fiend monarch. Regaining composure, Toru embraced the circumstance. Alongside a labyrinth close by, and as its registered owner, he chose they should investigate. They neared the entrance as a system notice verified his personal hall had been established. Transport turned available instantly. Arriving within, the company was amazed by the labyrinth's majestic towering architecture. Toru and his companions stepped into a vast unfamiliar hall, flooded alongside glow, and lined alongside tall arched windows. They examined the crystal closely. It resembled a central heart, but a scan unveiled the real one was located one level underneath. Alongside container space nearly full, Toru proposed wielding the empty hall for storing items. The fox-eared maiden eagerly accepted, and questioned to reserve part of the region for her belongings. She swiftly placed multiple wooden chests on the level, claiming merely a tiny portion of space for her collection. Opening one, he discovered his own gone shirt. Realizing numerous items within were his, Toru was startled. Kaede and Frau both charged to claim a corner of the space, arguing over who came initial. Following losing the dispute due to Panda's larger size, Frau reluctantly agreed a smaller region. She chose a distant corner, clearly annoyed but not resisting further. Tension stood up once more as one maiden accused the floating eyeball of deliberately following her. Regardless of her protests, the being stayed close, causing her growing irritation. Their antics escalated, alongside the maiden screaming and running in circles whereas the being chased her. Toru watched quietly, amused by how swiftly their bond had formed. Eventually, the sight moved to a silent countryside home behind a clear sky. Under a clear heavens, the fox-eared maiden gladly hung garments on a line, her enthusiasm glow and carefree. From the balcony, he enjoyed the tranquil dawn air, sipping coffee whereas remembering on their tranquil existence. Their conversation pivoted practical as she warned him of their strategy. He understood she merely had one attire, having caught the rest during a prior encounter alongside hostile humans. Suggesting a trip into municipality, she proposed buying new garments. Toru, seeing no cause to refuse, casually accepted to the notion. As they readied for the outing, he acknowledged he too was short on clothing. It was clear both required to restock prior to their next travels could start. The company came at a bustling capital nestled between rocky hills. Its gem buildings and crowded roads signaled they had arrived at the metropolis. Within a furniture store, Frau excitedly showcased a grand chair, insisting it was a perfect fit for Toru. Toru grinned but politely refused, saying it seemed too extravagant for his taste. Alternatively, he created a mental note to purchase container chests for his haul. Whereas walking across the busy roads, they searched for shops selling suitable garments for Frau. Options appeared plentiful. Prior to they could decide, different ally rushed forward, calling in delight about a nearby doll store. Due to sizing issues, Frau couldn't find garments that fit properly. Toru chose they would have to settle alongside what's available for currently. Reluctantly, she accepted to try something new. Although skeptical at initial, she acknowledged the attire wasn't as bad as expected. Assurance swiftly came back as she boasted about her charm, regardless of playful teasing from Panda. Their exchange escalated into mock aggression. Toru stepped in to compose things down, softly asking Frau not to provoke her ally. The temper softened once more. Shortly following, they stepped into a silent doll store flooded alongside shelves of finely dressed figures, catching everyone's attention with its charm. Within the doll store, Toru's focus moved to memories of his history. He recalled Nei and Sora, who formerly played alongside dolls during their childhood. Thoughts of Lisa trailed. She had an expensive doll too, but swiftly abandoned it, losing curiosity like she did in numerous things. He recalled questioning her about it. Lisa's reply was basic: the doll wasn't important. Alongside a cold grin, she compared the abandoned toy to him, something formerly required, now tossed aside. Snapping out of his thoughts, Toru offered a vague answer. Frau seemed at him, concerned by his stillness. Frau tried on various outfits, but all of them were slightly too huge. The team swiftly understood that nothing in the store fit her exactly. Toru questioned the shopkeeper if they had any sprite-sized clothing. The elderly male, intrigued, verified he was the owner, and noted their dilemma. Upon learning that Frau was a sprite, the shopkeeper increased excited. He rushed off, revealing a dear chest of miniature garments. Alongside emotion, he clarified the garments were created by his late wife, who dreamed that fairies might one morning wear them. Honoring her wish, he provided the clothing to them free of charge. His gentle grin transported both kindness and silent sorrow. Toru hesitated, acknowledging the garments were valuable. Frau, nevertheless, maintained that the male's willingness to give them was what mattered most. Grateful for the gesture, the shopkeeper grinned kindly. Frau confidently announced she'd fulfill the dream, back the gift. Sorting across the chest, they discovered numerous items that fit. Some pieces, including underwear, sparked spirited exchanges between her and Panda. Impressed, Toru admired the craftsmanship. The owner clarified that the dolls were originally created to display his wife's handmade garments. Over period, doll making turned his existence passion, changing a enjoyed dream into a lasting legacy. Frau proudly displayed off a new attire, spinning as she questioned for Toru's opinion. He provided a simple compliment, saying she seemed nice. Not satisfied, she paraded more outfits, each more extravagant than the last. Toru did his best to respond honestly to each one. Alongside a bit of teasing, he noted her dramatic poses, whereas Frau maintained he pay focus to the attire details, not just her flair. Eventually Toru grinned and offered her genuine praise, which created her glow alongside pride. The shopkeeper, shifted by the sight, sensed his late wife's dream had eventually come true. Alongside smiles and thanks, Toru, Frau, and their companions thanked the shopkeeper. They promised to visit once more, their palms full alongside the gifted garments. From the doorway, the elderly male bowed softly and informed them they were forever welcome. His silent tone gripped warmth and sincerity. Afterward, he rested solo, gazing at a framed photo of his late wife. Emotion welled up as he whispered thanks for a dream fulfilled. Unwrapping a package abandoned there, he discovered stacks of funds and a heartfelt note urging him to proceed his doll making. Startled and shifted, he muttered in sheer surprise, wondering aloud just who that generous young male genuinely was. Following making the store, Toru warned Frau to cherish the gift. She promised, calling them her most treasured garments. Early in the dawn, Kaidi cheerfully greeted Toru alongside enthusiasm and devotion, ready to take care of the household chores. Toru, yet sitting on the bed, watched Kaidi's unusually radiant temper. She provided him new shirts, whereas pointing out meal stains and sweat from the evening, softly urging him to change. Kaidi blushed at Toru's teasing remark, denying any discomfort. Toru handed over his garments, slightly embarrassed. Kaidi pivoted away alongside the laundry, hesitating prior to sneaking a discreet sniff. Shortly following, a warm breakfast awaited Toru, a hearty dish and a fresh cup of coffee, signaling a tranquil start to different silent morning in their travels. Over breakfast, Toru saw the shift in their usual food. Kaidi clarified she had visited a local bakery, bringing back freshly baked goods that impressed him alongside their quality. Whereas enjoying the warm food, they reflected on how well they had stayed. What was mattered to be a brief visit had pivoted into a week in the metropolis. Leaning back, Toru acknowledged his reluctance to leave. The tranquil routine had become so pleasant that even planning their mornings sensed unnecessary. Questioned about sites to visit, Kaidi had nobody in thoughts but proposed they go shopping together. Their conversation moved to provisions, as Kaidi mentioned how swiftly the meal was depleting. Following finishing breakfast, Toru accepted to go shopping and provided to handle the dishes. Kaidi, satisfied, remained to prepare for their outing. Just as he started cleaning, a loud crash shattered the stillness. Toru pivoted sharply, yelling for the others to come back as a mess splattered the window. He rushed to the open portal, merely to see Frau and the slime fleeing across the heavens. Alongside a sigh, he understood they had by now escaped. Afterward that morning, Toru rested at an outdoor cafe, listening to locals speak of growing dangers sandworms sighted throughout the lands of Armand. They discussed peculiar weather tornadoes, earthquakes and floods, blaming it on an imbalance in nature. Discussion of regenerative beings and rising association requests flooded the square. Toru, amazed by the grim conversation, gently excused himself from the table. He and Kaidi strolled across the bazaar, admiring the colorful displays. Whereas browsing meal stalls, Toru reflected on their extended stay. Alongside provisions and palm, he asked whether it was period to move on from the capital. Kaidi accepted, although parting stirred a sense of reluctance. They both recognized how attached they had grown to their tranquil routine. Gazing at the heavens, Toru sensed torn, known faces and composed days tempted him to stay, but a deeper pull urged him forward. Toru remained gently, staring out over the ledge. The memory of treachery yet lingered, reminding him of a history he couldn't fully let go. He warned himself that this travels was never just about travel, it was a route to heal, to recover, and to regain purpose. Alongside that believed, he stepped forward. On the way to the bazaar, Kaidi verified she yet had things to buy. They rejoined the audience, weaving across a sea of busy shoppers. Whereas checking her items, Kaidi saw citizens calling out for a gone youngster. Concerned, she seemed around the bustling square. Hearing her child had gone close by, both he and Kaidi volunteered to assist in the search. Toru and Kaidi collected details from the parent. The maiden, named Kumin, had brown hair, pigtails, and wore a shirt alongside a bear on it. They headed within the audience. Both started calling out across the packed marketplace, hoping their voices might reach the caught youngster wandering close by. Kaidi wondered the maiden had by now exited the region. Toru understood the circumstance was more serious than he had expected. He tried to stay concentrated, although the aroma of grilled meal momentarily distracted him. Possibilities swirled across his thoughts, including the threat of kidnapping. Abruptly, a notion hit. Toru proposed Kaidi use her heightened sense of smell to track the maiden. To aid the search, the parent handed over Kumin's handkerchief. Kaidi grabbed a far breath, wielding it to lock onto the youngster's scent. In a flash, Kaidi verified the scent was fresh. Kumin was yet close, likely within the bazaar. She rushed forward alongside Toru and the parent following closely. They crossed the crowded paths, weaving between merchants and townsfolk, until Kaidi pivoted into a narrow alley, pointing alongside urgency. Down the route, a known tone wept out. Kaidi spotted Kumin solo and scared. Relief swept over the company as they neared. The parent embraced her child tightly. As Kaidi and Toru observed, they understood Frau and Panda were gone, prompting a new concern. Kumin reunited alongside her parent, but the relief was brief-lived. Feelings rushed as the parent scolded her child, not out of fury, but fear. Abruptly, the earth rumbled behind their feet. Toru froze, recognizing the sound from prior discussions. Something gigantic stirred underneath. A violent eruption split the gem path open. Rubble strewn as Kaidi observed in surprise, unable to move. From the cracked earth, a monstrous sandworm emerged, roaring alongside terrifying force and lofty over the capitol buildings. Disorder trailed. Kumin screamed for her parent, whereas the being advanced. Terror swept the alley as the threat loomed closer. Toru swiftly reassured everyone as he placed Kumin's parent to caution. Kaidi observed close by in surprise, astonished by his swift action. Alongside no period to lose, Toru instructed Kaidi to distract the being, whereas he guided the residents away from threat. She accepted without any delay. He handed responsibility to Frau and Panda, trusting them to guide the parent and youngster to caution. Regardless of his concern, he readied to features the threat. Clenching his fists, Toru agreed his role. There was no hall for regret, merely combat. Kaidi cast the initial strike. Her formidable kick broke the gem route, landing squarely on the being as the battle truly began. She understood she had drawn the being still sufficient and escaped the alley. The creature lunged, merely to be met alongside her fierce counterattack in open space. Toru spotted her in threat and rushed in, but the sandworm's tail hit Initial, hurling her aside. He shouted out in alarm and readied to engage. The beast reeled but didn't fall. Toru hesitated, thinking it might be finished, but the being's form twitched ominously. Abruptly, it regenerated. Understanding hit this was the trait others had cautioned about. Normal attacks wouldn't be sufficient. Checked on Kaidi, relieved she was unharmed. He swiftly devised a strategy and questioned if she could use frost to counter the regeneration. Kaidi rested embarrassed and covered, her garments burned away by the worm's acidic assault. Toru shouted in surprise, averting his gaze as she questioned him not to stare. Regardless of the circumstance, they had to act. Kaidi clarified that frost sorcery wasn't an option. He weighed the risks. Brute force wouldn't work toward a regenerating foe. They had to coordinate, or the whole capital might fall. Abruptly, a notion sparked. Toru asked for Kaidi's gale sorcery when he offered the signal, assured this strategy could create the space he needed. Alongside precise movement, Toru pinned the being's form toward the gem, locking it into position for what was approaching next. As the worm barreled across the roads, terrified citizens strewn in each direction, alongside perfect timing, Kaidi cast a burst of air behind him. Lifted skyward, Toru steadied himself. He had all the space he required currently. Overhead the rooftops, Toru summoned his sorcery. A blazing torrent formed in the heavens as he used his strongest flame incantation downward, in a blazing arc. Following the dust darkened, Kumin and her parent expressed heartfelt thanks. Their caution was obtained, although Kumin's farewell stayed as cheeky as ever. Kaidi chuckled alongside Toru. Although weariness lingered, no one was injured. The team enjoyed a silent, relieved instant alongside. They had protected the city. Alongside the threat backed them, the company enjoyed playful banter. Toru acknowledged Panda's help, although not lacking teasing over the broken window. As evening collapsed, Toru draped his jacket over Kaidi, thanking her for her bravery. She blushed slightly but grinned, moved by his gesture. Holding the jacket close, Kaidi expressed her thanks. Her remarks were soft, but the warmth in her tone created Toru rest. Afterward, they received a key from a local official. Their help had deserved them faith, and currently they were ready to move on. Toru promised to act responsibly going forward. As they discussed their next goal, a new travels gently started on the horizon. As they readied to leave, Panda delivered a noisy farewell one that shocked even their stoic host. The team chuckled across the disorder. They crossed the bridge in haste, chased more by embarrassment than threat. Apologies trailed back them. Toru, Kaidi, and the others set their sights on the sprite settlement, their travels moving towards a new chapter. Blight and his companions came at the border municipality of Grugget, a stopover on their travels towards the sprite settlement nestled outside the mountains. Waking in the dawn, Blight stretched alongside ease, eventually enjoying tranquil days. The fox-eared maiden and a tiny being greeted him warmly. Kade, having came back early from municipality, brought bread for breakfast. Their next goal was verified, and excitement about visiting the sprite settlement flooded the hall. As Blight readied for the morning, he felt a person had been trying to reach him. The slime and Kade observed him closely. Realizing his mail was nearing its limit, Blight accepted it was period for a shift. The company stepped into a striking valley framed by cliffs and gem bridges. Toru could not avoid admire the natural beauty as they pressed onward. Shortly they remained prior to a woods of colossal trees, their thick roots weaving paths throughout a false lake. Whereas traversing the twisted roots, Toru brought up his need for mail. Kaide warned him that his arms could shift form depending on his thoughts. Curious, he questioned if wielding multiple holy weapons was possible. The reply unveiled it was scarce. Tales spoke of age-old kings who gripped such force. Holy weapons were nearly unbreakable and could amplify a wielder's might alongside overwhelming force. Whereas climbing the shrine steps, Toru expressed surprise at Kaida's unwavering faith. She reassured him, assured in his role as owner of the holy arms. Outdoors the grand doors, the company discovered footprints. Toru examined the earth, suspecting that others might have stepped into prior to them, possibly by now claiming the treasure. As they stepped within, the gigantic gateway creaked open, revealing a blinding glow and ringing void beyond the gate. They advanced cautiously across a grand hallway, flames lighting their route towards the sealed hall forward. A sigh of relief, nothing had been taken. Laughing alongside, they understood they had came in period. At the center of the hall, a raised platform awaited. Toru neared alongside steady steps, observed closely by Kaede and the others. Although assured on the surface, uncertainty lingered in his thoughts. He wasn't sure if the arms would genuinely respond or form the mail he required. Summoning his resolve, Toru stepped forward. A burst of radiant glow enveloped him as the activation started. Elsewhere, days prior in the metropolis capital of Armand, a company shouted White Fang stepped into association, seeking profitable jobs. Amid the company, a blonde male mocked others, proud of his profile. He assumed no one expected a champion to appear there. At the association counter, a receptionist directed White Fang to the roll board like everyone else. The team's assurance clearly deflated. Sane, their commander, was amazed by the lack of recognition. He dramatically announced his identity as a champion and commander of an S-ranked team. His boasting proceeded. Frustrated that his reputation mattered nothing here, the locals mocked his demands, telling him to earn his location like anyone else. Tensions flared. Enraged, Sane struck out, striking a close-by explorer lacking warning and escalating the circumstance. A rapid retaliation trailed. Chairs flew as the association descended into disorder. Sane hurled throughout the hall in a humiliating counterattack. Sane remained enraged, blaming others for provoking him. The association members were amazed his actions didn't reflect the image of a true champion. Outrage expanded swiftly. Multiple explorers amid Sane, calling him a fraud and demanding his expulsion from the association. Regardless of being outnumbered, Sane retaliated violently. Assured in his force, he mocked their short levels and hit lacking restraint. As injuries mounted, an association officer pleaded for him to stop. Sane dismissed the warning, but concern crept in as he understood the consequences of going too still. Meanwhile, a clerk unveiled the true heroes were the Manu Brigade, the ones who overcame a threat even the National Army couldn't stop. Sane's look twisted in sheer surprise upon hearing of the Manu Brigade's achievements. Although unfamiliar alongside the team, he started to realize their feats slaying dragons and wielding fabled swords still outshined his own. When informed they had departed for Grugget, his irritation increased. It eventually clicked they were heading to the identical location he had formerly mocked. Panicked and furious, Sane commanded his company to leave instantly, ignoring the injured yet lying about the guild hall. Still away, the silent border municipality of Grugget remained in the distance. A single identify echoed Manu Brigade. Sane came in Grugget, burning alongside fury and resolve. Learning the Manu Brigade's location, he plotted to confront and finish them personally. Twisted thoughts flooded his thoughts. He envisioned seizing the Holy Blade initial next destroying its current wielder without mercy. Shortly, he arrived at the Shrine of Grugget, a lofty building concealed within the cliffs, rumored to house the legendary weapon. Alongside tightened fists, Sane stepped within the shrine hall. He was elated to eventually stand prior to the sacred sword he had long desired. Encouraged by his team, Sane neared the altar. His ambition rushed. This was the instant all his work would supposedly be rewarded. Sane remained prior to the Holy Blade, gaze wild alongside obsession. He demanded its force, declaring vengeance on all who opposed him. Gripping the hilt, he tried to lift it, convinced that summoning a grand aura would help. His team observed quietly as he struggled. Regardless of the theatrics, the blade stayed unmoved. His companions mocked him playfully, expecting quick result from their self-proclaimed champion. Sweat poured down his features as terror set in. No matter how hard he dragged, the arms wouldn't budge. Even following 24 hours within the shrine, Sane failed. The blade had utterly rejected him. The morning following Sane's failure, the Holy Blade responded to someone else. Toru. Lacking struggle, Toru remained tall alongside the arms in palm. A surge of enthusiasm swirled about him as his companions watched in awe. Force collected, forming a protective shell that started reshaping his body. The holy arms currently forged into armor, crafted precisely for him. He seemed down at the new gauntlet on his arm, gently recognizing the transformation. The male was his undeniably and completely. Alongside composed resolve, Toru remained amid by force. Unlike Sane, he had been chosen lacking pride, violence or ego. Toru tested the holy male's movement. It sensed glow and balanced, allowing smooth, precise swings alongside his blade. When questioned how it sensed, he acknowledged it was surprisingly comfortable. Although metallic, it shifted like soft leather, perfect for combat. Kaide attempted an appraisal, but the male's information was concealed. Toru assumed it required a much higher tier to unlock its mysteries. He reflected on the male's nature technology that changed based on the user's will. It was more than arms, it was a legacy. Alongside the holy male obtained, Toru was ready to move on. The next goal was clear, the sprite settlement. Far in the woods, Toru's company set up camp behind lofty trees. The tranquil clearing shielded them from the rain overhead. As drops collapsed outside the canopy, Toru noted how the dense leaves formed a natural roof, keeping their camp dry and undisturbed. Prior to resting, he thanked Rasuke for standing protect. The being observed quietly, loyal and alert. Toru couldn't fall asleep. Vigilance had become second nature. He forever scouted for opponents prior to resting, whereas Frau and Panda slept soundly within the tent. A notice emerged confirming his training limit restoration. Although useful, Toru concerned it might yet once more pause his growth. Toru reflected on his unique talent. The save technique had been alongside him since birth, but it grabbed him 25 years to unlock its true use. As he believed about his future progress, Kaida stirred in her sleep, calling out to him. She begged not to be abandoned there. Shifted by her remarks, Toru softly placed his palm on her skull, presenting silent reassurance whereas she clung to him in her dream. Alongside a composed tone, he promised he would never leave her. His devotion was unwavering. That evening, Kaida's dream pivoted, troubling once more. She pleaded for help, whereas Toru observed, quietly sharing in her pain. Toru pondered if Kaida's plea for help arrived from memories of her period in slavery. Her agony was hard to interpret, but it lingered deeply. Rain collapsed softly over the tent. Toru whispered a soft goodnight, keeping her identify close as the woods darkened into stillness. Frau sprang into combat, smashing across monstrous foes alongside overwhelming force. Her strikes echoed across the battlefield, scattering opponents alongside every blow. As the dust darkened, she remained tall atop a pile of overcame beasts, her giant hammer resting on her shoulders. She confronted them alongside confidence, questioning their prior doubts about her combat abilities. Their reactions unveiled their history underestimation. Remembering on the clash, they acknowledged their mistake. Toru especially sensed guilty for underestimating her force and resolve. Whereas reviewing profile progress, it was unveiled Toru's technique had boosted everyone's training gain, accelerating their tier-ups, much to their surprise. Lacking any delay, Frau rushed within the woods, keen to gain more training. Toru and Kaidai trailed behind, calling for her to wait. Unable to proceed, lacking her lead, the two chose to rest behind the trees. Toru gently readied coffee as they waited. Abruptly, Toru felt threat, and swiftly intercepted an incoming threat. His speed astonished the others, who recognized his sharp reflexes. In reply, a company of opponents emerged, guided by a veteran combatant. They moved together, aiming to overwhelm with numbers. Amid by opponents, Toru and Kaide remained alert. There was no period departed to relax. Combat was inevitable. Toru and Kaide readied themselves as sorcery barriers amid them. Their stance unveiled composed focus amidst the growing threat. Overhead them, the opponents initiated a huge-scale incantation. The commander announced the region must be eradicated for the municipality's caution, prompting panic among his allies. Noticing Frau's prolonged absence, Toru started to worry. He shouted for her to return, realizing he couldn't wait any longer. His commanding tone echoed across the woods, shaking even the opponent ranks. A formidable force rushed across the trees. Alarmed by the incoming companionship, the opponents pivoted. Toru recognized the sound. It was Frau. She was eventually on her way back. Frau reappeared alongside Fury, slamming her arms down as she confronted those who had dared approach Toru. She announced his identity alongside reverence, stunning everyone close by. Recognition expanded amid the attackers. Murmurs of her being part of the great race moved their perspective. Lacking any delay, Frau cast a formidable assault, directing it at the company's commander, her own parent. Her might departed the others speechless. Afterward, the company proceeded their travels across a tranquil forest. Fairies guided them along glowing paths toward a hidden village. Upon arrival, they were welcomed to the land of fairies. Although tension lingered, Toru remained solid, defending his companion's actions and earning regard. They arrived at the gateway of the Sprite homeland, a location marked by lofty gem arches and mystical lights fluttering across the air. A guide clarified the illusion concealing the settlement's true form. Encouraged to walk forward, they stepped into lacking any delay. Outside the illusion, an enchanting realm unfolded. Giant trees housed sprite dwellings, and the scenery overflowed alongside existence and glow. Awe expanded throughout their faces. Fairies busily tended livestock, collected nectar, and played amid flowers. They welcomed the guests kindly, presenting them tea and smiles. Within a cozy guest hall, Toru and Kaide enjoyed a fragrant tea created from local flowers, remembering on the tranquil beauty surrounding them. The settlement elder introduced himself as Frau's grandfather and apologized for his heir's prior hostility. Toru observed as Frau dragged her parent up, demanding he apologize. Regardless of the rough handling, Toru assured them that he could take it. Yet dazed, the parent struck out in irritation, merely to be scolded yet once more. His bewilderment deepened upon recognizing Toru among the fairies. Frau clarified Toru's identity, calling him the last of the great race. Her remarks caused shock and stillness amid the onlookers. Overcome alongside guilt, her parent dropped to his knees and begged for forgiveness. Toru observed close by, astonished by the unexpected show of regret. Whereas the previous opponent preceded his repentance, Frau and her grandfather warned him to reflect on his actions. The company collected once more, shifting focus towards the matter at Palm. Toru acknowledged that Frau's decision to bring him here had purpose. The settlement elder unveiled the fact Fairyland faced a critical crisis. Unable to stop it themselves, they pursued help from the outdoors, especially the Great Race. Frau was chosen since she could pray to the Great Race. As a sprite priestess, she was uniquely suited for the task. She enjoyed her hardships, revealing how well she'd searched for Toru. Her resolve verified she had chosen wisely, and Toru belonged alongside the Great Race. Toru listened as the settlement elders reflected on the peculiar events that guided to this meeting. He recognized that fortune had guided them alongside. Alongside a grave look, the elder encouraged Toru to see the threat for himself. There was no richer way to understand the circumstance. Guided across an old gem archway, they neared a sealed region. Toru watched the ruined route ahead and sensed something powerful nearby. At the base of an age-old trunk remained a gigantic construct, controlled by magical restraints. It radiated dormant yet deadly energy. Elder clarified that this construct, abandoned there by the Great Race, had reawakened. The fairies clarified they had restrained the construct alongside sorcery following it abruptly awakened and started attacking. Nevertheless, its bindings were weakening over time. Toru stepped closer, analyzing the circumstance. He noted that alchemist-created golems typically couldn't act independently, lacking their master's commands. As Toru neared, the construct stirred. Its gaze locked on him, reacting to his companionship as if recognizing something known. Regardless of concerns from his companions, Toru stayed composed. Kaide reassured the others, assured in his might and judgment. Realizing the construct didn't appear to follow any command, Toru considered it defective. But just next, the restraints snapped. It was not anymore contained. As the construct fully awakened, Toru instructed Kaide to stay back. She accepted, lacking any delay, trusting his judgment in the looming confrontation. Shadowy enthusiasm rushed as the construct readied a huge-scale assault. Toru readied himself, while Kaide formed a protective barrier for those behind. The construct lunged, releasing destructive force. Toru countered alongside a rapid strike, damaging its skull, although the being remained operational. Abruptly, roots from the gigantic trunk rushed about them. Toru stepped back, noticing the ground tremble underfoot. A concealed gap unsealed close by. Toru reacted instantly, wielding the opening to reposition and prepare for a decisive move. Toru swiftly ascended the lofty trunk, drawing the golem's focus. Kaide and the others observed anxiously from underneath as the combat escalated mid-air. In an unexpected clash amid the branches, Toru cast a formidable strike. The impact sent the construct hurtling across the air. The opponent crashed violently to the earth, triggering a gigantic explosion that shook the surrounding woods. From overhead, Toru watched the pit. Although the construct lay broke, he stayed cautious, unsure if the threat had truly ended. Jumping into position, Toru readied his blade for the final blow, ready to end the clash for good. Alongside accuracy and force, Toru plunged his blade within the construct's heart. Enthusiasm burst outward as the final blow landed cleanly. The surrounding woods shook from the shockwave. Trees swayed as dust and rubble spiraled within the air from the impact. Kaide and the residents rushed to the pit's edge. The construct lay motionless, utterly ruined. Toru remained victorious at the center. As composed came back, Toru casually commented about being hungry, unfazed by the devastation back him. Watching proudly, Kaide boasted about her owner's might, whereas the elder acknowledged the overwhelming force of the Great Race. Following the combat, Toru proposed eating. The elder accepted, promising a grand meal readied by the village's best cooks. Following a well-travels, Sane's team came at North Star, a sun-scorched land stated to conceal the holy blade. The cracked earth stretched endlessly behind their feet. Grumbling echoed across the company as the heat bore down on them. The others increased irritated, placing the blame on Sane's decision-making. Haunted by history criticism, he recalled the scorn from his homeland. His standing as a combatant was by now on thin frost. Resolve hardened his look. This blade was his last opportunity at redemption. Prior to irritation could boil over, a teammate pointed towards a distant capital presenting rest and food. Reluctantly, the company accepted to rest in the close-by capital. Fatigue had worn them down, and the shrine could wait different morning. Bustling roads and the smell of meal guided them to a busy lodging, where cheerful servers welcomed them amid the desert heat. Nevertheless, bewilderment set in as peculiar dishes were placed prior to them. No one could quite recognize what lay on the plates. Bowls of insects and larvae stirred unease. Surprise rippled across the company at the unforeseen cuisine. Whereas some recoiled in disgust, one of them boldly grabbed a spoon, unfazed by the unsettling food. Toward all expectations, the red-haired combatant devoured her insect-laden food alongside a radiant smile. Watching her, Sane recoiled in disgust, struggling to hide his discomfort. Meanwhile, the companions softly decided safer options, simple bread and salad, to avoid the local delicacies. Regardless of his aversion, Sane's hunger gnawed at him. If they didn't eat currently, he wasn't sure when they'd get different opportunity. Guided by desperation and confidence, he made himself to eat. Declaring himself the champion, he shoved the insects into his mouth alongside trembling palms. Alongside the peculiar food back them, the company departed the capital. Age-old temple ruins rose ahead, bathed in sunlight and mystery. The company eventually arrived at the age-old shrine. Weathered stones and lofty columns marked the end of their long trek. Just as success appeared within reach, Sane doubled over in agony. His stomach churned violently, still worse than anyone else's, regardless of eating the identical meal. Resolved not to fall back, he pressed on. The holy blade was nearly his, he couldn't lose to a stomachache. As the companions asked his trembling palms and sweat-soaked brow, Sane struggled to respond. Internally screaming, he battled to contain his gas. Alongside a twitching eye and strained tone, he struck out, demanding stillness from his oblivious companions. Alongside a loud creak, the heavy shrine doors swung open. The company stepped within, awe mixing alongside anticipation as the inner sanctum unveiled proper. Sane's gaze locked onto the distant pedestal. Each step sensed heavier than the last, but the blade was eventually within reach. His companions cheered him on, ignorant of his internal struggle. Guided by desperation, Sane rushed forward. A twisted grin crept throughout his features as he shouted his claim. The blade shimmered atop the pedestal. Sane grasped the hilt but hesitated. A suspicious tension flooded the hall as everyone observed in stillness. Clenching his muscles, he attempted to pull, but a new crisis emerged. His stomach threatened rebellion. Just as Sane struggled alongside the blade, his ally rushed forward and joined the effort. A peculiar sensation amazed Sane as the blade arrived free. His form moved limp, and tears of relief or something else streamed down his features. The others shattered into wild celebration. Outdoors, the shrine shook. A burst of glow erupted from within, signaling a formidable shift that echoed across the land. Still away, in the concealed settlement of fairies, the atmosphere moved. Tiny wings fluttered as the beings stirred, sensing the disturbance. Within moments, the fairies burst into motion, laughing, dancing in taverns in frantic excitement. Toru lifted his glass and complimented the fairies' honey liquor, delighting in its smooth taste. Shortly, the air flooded alongside delicious aromas. Dishes floated in, transported by smiling fairies, each platter more colorful than the last. He grinned in amazement, fork and knife in palm, amazed by the sight of roasted meats, pastries, and exotic fruits. Whereas enjoying the food, a fox-eared maiden provided to serve him. Toru agreed, wearing a grin, although the unexpected body of her parent caught him by surprise. As music and laughing amid them, the girl's parent asked Toru about her. Politely, Toru acknowledged it was too shortly to judge, but he could by now tell she had potential. Although grateful, he acknowledged discomfort at the notion of the fox-eared maiden being referred to as his slave. Her parent, nevertheless, reacted alongside fierce confidence. To him, servitude was a holy esteem, and he maintained that fairies existed to serve the great races. Embarrassed, the child tried to compose the circumstance. Meanwhile, Toru chuckled, astonished by the fairies' passionate devotion and their parents' dramatic declaration. Excited youngsters rushed forward, keen to speak alongside Toru. They pleaded alongside their parent to let them interact too, calling him out for monopolizing the guest. As the evening moved on, Toru excused himself, politely changing down the girl's offer to escort him. Away from the noise of the celebration, Toru rested gently behind the starlit trees. The distant sounds of laughing arrived at him, but he stayed yet, far and believed. His gaze scanned the glowing settlement underneath, yet his look gripped a subtle melancholy. The weight of something unseen tugged at him. Kayed shortly neared, softly calling his identify. She rested beside him and asked how he felt. Sensing more behind his composed demeanor, Kaede acknowledged she had been watching him. Toru grinned, caught in the act of retreating from the audience. When Kaede questioned about his history, memories resurfaced. Seeing Frau's warm family stirred agony reminders of his own loss. Toru gently recalled the tragedy that shifted his existence. At 15, he had come home to find both his parents murdered. Standing at their graves, he unveiled he had no other family. Since that morning, he had lived solo. Alongside a wistful look, Toru recalled how Lisa kept him going. Her companionship offered him the might to live. Kaede softly questioned if Lisa was the lady who exposed him. Toru acknowledged the fact. Regardless of the agony of their parting, he agreed that she had chosen a new route with Sane. As he stared within the evening, Toru admitted a deeper wound: he simply wasn't sufficient for Lisa. Behind the sparkling evening heavens, Kaede leaned into Toru's side. He didn't pull away. For an instant, the agony of the history faded in her warmth and stillness. The next morning, Toru and Kaide resumed their travels. Navigating across dense woods, they stumbled upon age-old remains buried in the earth, concealed, overlooked and untouched. Standing prior to the crumbled building, both explorers understood they had found something important. Toru verified the site's significance. Kaide, ready and alert, activated her appraisal technique to start examining the region for artifacts and traces of the construct thrice away rested there. Excited by the opportunity, Toru encouraged Frau to tear up too. Their tone moved to strategy. Amid the wreckage of defeated golems, Kaide shouted out she had discovered something. Toru neared, brushing aside rubble to admission a concealed mechanism. A sealed doorway remained between broke constructs. Lacking any delay, Toru chose they'd investigate. Within, a winding route guided them into an underground cavern. As they descended, Toru spotted a faint glow forward. Something formidable was waiting. At the hall's center, glowing lines formed an enormous magical array. The hall pulsed alongside age-old enthusiasm neither of them could ignore. Kaide verified it was a teleportation sorcery circle. Toru, amazed, acknowledged he'd seen something similar formerly prior to. Hovering overhead the glowing sorcery circle, Toru and Kaide discussed its peculiar activation. It didn't seem formidable sufficient to travel still. Kaide wondered it could be linked to different circle. If that second entrance existed and was active, they could use it to travel between distant locations. Although uncertain of its goal, Toru couldn't help but imagine the possibilities: uncharted sites, treasure troves, or something no one had ever seen prior to. Lacking any delay, Kaide grinned. Wherever Toru moved, she would follow. Her devotion was unwavering, rooted not in obligation, but in faith. Alongside her support back him, Toru created his choice. The unnoticed awaited, but his resolve was clear. As Toru readied to leave the sprite settlement, disorder shattered out. The fairies clung to him, pleading for him to stay 30 years if possible. Frustrated, Toru attempted to shake them off, reminding them they were supposed to be dignified servants of the great race. Just when it appeared Toru might explode, Frau intervened. Her sharp remarks warned the others to act alongside grace and thanks, not desperation. Shamed by her outburst, the fairies collapsed silent. They promised to wait patiently for Toru's return, taking his departure alongside tearful dignity. When one tiny sprite thanked him for saving her, he replied modestly it was the least he could do. Toru, Kaide and Frau offer farewell to the sprite settlement, promising to return. The residents waved alongside teary gaze, reluctant but respectful. As they departed the woods, their goal stayed unnoticed. Toru warned the company to prepare for any terrain or challenge ahead. They remained formally more prior to the glowing teleportation circle. Resolved, they tightened their grip on each other. Alongside, they sprang within the glow, crossing boldly into whatever awaited beyond. At last, Sin grasped the holy blade. His gaze flooded alongside success. The arms radiated light, marking the end of his long pursuit. Years of effort flashed across his thoughts. A failed draw, a missed opportunity, and an unforeseen incident. Nobody of it mattered currently. Whereas he admired his achievement, a companion brought worried report. Demonic threats had infiltrated the capital, calling for rapid action. Different teammate asked their readiness. Regardless of doubts, Sin assured them he'd respond lacking any delay, should threat arise. Their debate intensified. Although cautious, Sin acknowledged the need to protect the fearful townsfolk lacking facing unnecessary sacrifice. An unexpected disturbance near Nostrilter broke the composed. Sin, frustrated by the recurring disorder, readied for the worst yet once more. Meanwhile, internal tensions brewed. One member asked Sora's usefulness, citing her lack of aggression. Lisa, although obedient, was deemed temporarily valuable. Discussions pivoted cold as future strategies were weighed. The notion of replacing weaker companions emerged, hinting at growing ruthlessness within the company. Prior to any decision was arrived at, a formidable tremor rocked the structure. Lisa acted swiftly, heading out to assess the circumstance. Outdoors, terror burst. Citizens fled in terror as shadowy streaks flooded the heavens, signaling the arrival of a new threat. Lisa rushed in alongside worried report. Demons had surfaced, and the locals were fleeing. Sin hesitated for an instant, puzzled by their unexpected body. Seeing an opportunity, he rallied the company. If they rescued the capital, it would be the perfect opportunity to prove the Holy Blade's force and boost their reputation. Torches illuminated the evening as armed residents collected, resolved to defend their home against the unknown threat. Disorder burst in the roads. Flames consumed buildings whereas armed attackers stormed across the gates, screaming alongside madness. The invaders displayed no mercy. Fighters were killed, goods looted, and women targeted, making destruction in their wake. A lofty fiend commander guided his army within the ruined roads, encouraging his kin to do as they satisfied alongside the remaining citizens. High overhead, Sin and his company spotted the opponent. He swiftly issued orders Lisa would unleash sorcery to corner the target. Nevertheless, a conflict shattered out. Sora pleaded to evacuate residents, but Scene dismissed her, calling that common lives gripped no priority in their task. Shaken by his cruelty, Sora hesitated. Her reply was silent, but flooded alongside resignation as she obeyed, lacking protest. Elsewhere, captured women and stolen provisions were dragged into hiding. The demons displayed no mercy as they obtained their loot and prisoners. Explosions of flame tore across the fiend ranks, engulfing them in blazing heat. Cries of agony echoed across the burning roads. Commander Darm gritted his teeth. His subordinates were amazed, unable to sign the source of the magical barrage closing in from each direction. Different blasts sent the opponent flying. The relentless assault kept them off balance, incapable to mount a proper defense. Scene seized the instant. Alongside fierce resolve, he cast a rapid surprise assault, aiming to end the opponent commander's resistance in a single strike. Steel met flesh as Scene drove his blade downward, delivering a crushing blow amid a violent shockwave. Scene entwined a fierce fiend combatant in close combat, blades clashing alongside brutal force. His strike landed, but the opponent remained steady. Abruptly, a devastating blast struck the barrier back them. The explosion shook the battlefield, scattering fighters in its wake. Thrown across the air, Scene crashed to the earth, wounded and disoriented. Agony rushed across his form as he tried to return. Ridiculing him, the fiend asked if he was genuinely the champion. Regardless of his condition, Scene struggled to reply, defiance in his gaze. Dread crept in. The fiend bore no damage from their combined attacks. Scene understood this opponent was still mightier than anyone had expected. In an unexpected twist, the fiend combatant was hit down. Lisa, clutching her arms, stared in sheer surprise at what she'd just done. Meanwhile, a new company of explorers stormed within the capital. Seeing the combat unfold, they charged forward to aid the amazed defenders. As the demons rallied, the fresh warriors met them skull on. Their combined might shoved back the attackers alongside relentless momentum. The battlefield burst alongside new clashes. Explorers and demons collided in an enraged melee behind a burning heavens. Recognizing their faces, Scene was relieved. Amid them were elite A-class and even S-class explorers. Reinforcements had eventually came. Explorers rushed forward alongside clear assurance. The demons remained ready, smirking at the challenge. Their commander dismissed the troops as ordinary. Formidable attacks cast from both sides. A deadly tornado and earth spikes tore throughout the battlefield towards the fiend commander. Yet the opponent barely flinched. Sorcery fizzled on impact, and a brutal counterattack trailed. One combatant was hit down, blood spraying throughout the field. Surprise expanded across the air. The brave fighter remained icy, staring at the gaping wound that had finished his resistance in one instant. Coldly the fiend commander dismissed him. To him it was nothing more than swatting away a nuisance. Different explorer collapsed to the earth, overcame. The fiend general stood tall, mocking his opponent's final moments without remorse. Alongside ruthless might, he slammed the combatant within the gem, laughing as the broke ground marked yet another victim. A sorcerer cast a flurry of gale spells, calling in desperation. Blades of air slashed across the battlefield but failed to halt the fiend's advance. Terror gripped her as her attacks fizzled. The commander taunted her, returning forward whereas she shook, unable to comprehend his immunity. Disgust and terror expanded across the air. Powerless and humiliated, she collapsed. The commander offered his troops full permission to act, lacking restraint. Composed, the fiend commander scanned the battlefield. His sights locked onto a figure in the distance, the champion he had been waiting for. In a flash he hit. Scene was hurled toward the barrier, alongside brutal force, unable to react in period. Taunted and bloodied, Scene acknowledged his tear. The fiend chuckled cruelly, calling him pathetic and unworthy of the ranked champion. Amid laughing and mockery, the commander ridiculed Scene's courage. Facing such might at tier 63 was seen as pure pride. Beaten and humiliated, Scene tightened his fists. Fury rushed within him as he swore vengeance on each last opponent. As Scene collapsed, his companions rushed to aid him. Disorder amid them, but they tried to stay concentrated on healing and regrouping. Guided by irritation, Scene struck out at his companions. He shouted them useless and blamed them for everything, ignoring their concern. Raising his tone, he insisted his existence mattered more, that a champion's worth outweighed others. Regardless of the tension, Nay stepped forward to buy period. She hit the opponent hard, giving the others a... Alongside cold accuracy, he finished her brief resistance, declaring the clash over. As Nay was hit down, Scene urged the others to flee, looking back. Terror gripped him, but the loss didn't slow his escape. Internally his thoughts pivoted cruel. Although Nay had formerly been useful, he abandoned her in his thoughts, wishing for her death as a convenient sacrifice. To his horror, her lifeless form was afterward displayed by the opponent. The sight amazed even him. Still away, a concealed ruin was breached. A person had broken across age-old gem to uncover a secret chamber. A new figure emerged, showing off a refined combat technique. Dust darkened as optimism gently re-entered the account. Following being teleported to a southern ruin, the company started surveying their surroundings. The heat was intense, and remains stretched throughout the rocky terrain. From overhead, Frau spotted distant smoke. Black clouds stood up gradually from what emerged to be a capital, likely a flame, possibly worse. The company swiftly chose to investigate. A sharp smell expanded across the air, burnt wood, blood, and something unmistakably foul. It was no ordinary blaze. Reaching the capital, they discovered devastation. People lay strewn, flames consumed buildings, and survivors battled to escape. Horrified by the destruction, they understood this was no accident. Something terrible had taken location, and they had came too late. Fires raged across the capital's remains. Amid the ash, the black-haired swordsman stumbled upon a charred corpse, evidence of the massacre that had taken location. Just as despair set in, his ally pointed out that some citizens were yet alive. Their task wasn't over yet. About the corner, two grinning fighters surveyed the disorder. They targeted survivors and beasts alike, seeking to turn them into twisted prizes. Fury burst. The swordsman confronted them, but his gaze opened. These weren't demons. Lacking any delay, his ally hit initial. Her blade split the air alongside a glowing technique /burst. The attackers charged alongside wild swings, assured in their might, but their targets remained solid, steady by the threat. One opponent raised a gigantic arms and hit alongside full force. The assault, named Breakhammer, arrived crashing down in a burst of dust and rubble. Regardless of the disorder, the heroes regrouped. They understood their focus had to shift. Survivors required help, not vengeance. The commander paused, realizing the fact. Currently wasn't the period to give in to fury. Rescuing residents had to come initial. Alongside renewed purpose, they split up, each assigned a direction. Their task was distinct: save everyone they could.